and welcome to WGTC Radio, the official podcast of entertainment website We Got This Covered. I'm Jonathan Lack.
And I'm Sean Chapman.
And we are here to talk about the motherfucking PlayStation 4.
Yes, we motherfucking are.
Well, Sean, this is a big week.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Really quick, we're not talking about the Oscars, we're not talking about anything else. Fuck you. We're talking about the PlayStation 4 because, man, there's a lot to talk about. We've got to get right into it. Sony held a press conference this week, last Wednesday, February 20th. I say press conference, but it was really like a big Apple-style event.
Yeah.
They had all their big people come out, talk about it, lots of developers. It was huge. And really all the gaming world was expecting, including us, was some details on the specs, maybe some details on the controller.
Yeah, like a couple of trailers and like some tech demos. And that was it.
Maybe a 30-minute presentation.
Yeah, we were not expecting the 2-hour extravaganza that we got.
Yeah, and it's basically put everyone reporting on games into just high alert.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of had to step up their game because Sony brought their A+++ game. They really, really brought it. They want to do well this time. Very well.
They have learned their lessons from what happened with the PS3, and
their launch,
Yeah, I've been immensely impressed with their press conference and how they're treating the PS4.
Yeah, and basically, we have done probably more preparation for this podcast than any other podcast.
Yeah.
We have, for the first time ever, 2 computers out. My computer recording and doing, secondary research. Sean's computer up with a 2-page outline for our podcast and other research.
Yeah, a bunch of pictures.
So we have a lot to talk about, and we're excited to talk about this because this is probably the most exciting gaming week in years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been like the most recent hardware announcements have been like the Wii U 2 years ago and stuff like that, but that doesn't really tickle your fancy if you're looking for stuff that pushes the envelope technologically.
Yeah.
A lot of the Wii U stuff is pretty cool, but the Wii U is technically still just really a current gen piece of hardware. And if you're looking for, what is the next generation of games going to look like? What are we going to do with new technology? This is what we've been waiting for.
Yes.
And so, yes, it is extremely exciting to finally get this, to finally let the cat out of the bag. We have been, for the past 2 years, there have been a lot of games like Watch Dogs and like Star Wars 1313, Bungie's Destiny, that everybody is knows it's going to be on the next generation system. The time frame for these games means that it has to be, but nobody's been able to talk about it yet. So finally I'm sure it must be a huge relief for these developers to finally be able to say, yes, for fuck's sake, we're making it for the PlayStation 4. No, this obviously is not going to run on an Xbox 360 or PS3.
Right.
And have it finally be out in the open and be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think, God, there's so much to dive into here. I think we are both immensely impressed by what Sony brought, and I think for one, it's just kind of a natural extension of all the impressive work Sony has been doing with their PS3 infrastructure and their Vita infrastructure over the last couple of years. And so I think before we get into the actual details of the announcements, I think we have to set a little bit of groundwork.
Okay.
First, Sean, we talked about this last week, but really quick, explain to us sort of the current state of gaming and why we need this next step.
Yeah, the current state of gaming has become extremely stale, at least in the console market. And as you know, the console market is by far the dominant market in gaming. You've got consoles, you've got handhelds, you've got mobile, which sort of is off on its own thing, and then you've got PC. And the PC gaming market sort of is always able to develop the technology, procedurally. You can modify your PCs, you can constantly be upgrading them, whereas consoles are a stable platform and you cannot do that. And so, since the consoles have dominated the gaming market, PCs have been able to develop technologically, but the games haven't been able to keep pace because, obviously, the vast majority of developers want to keep on making games for the consoles. And this has been a very long console cycle going on 7 and 8 years now. And so it's about time. We definitely need this technological innovation. We definitely need to push games in new directions because we have reached the peak of what we can do with the hardware in the Xbox 360 and the PS3. We reached that peak probably with the Halo 4 with Xbox 360. And there might actually still be a little juice out of the PS3 that nobody has managed to squeeze out because that's such a difficult piece of hardware to program for.
But I mean, if you want sort of a really simple, if you're not a technological person, I think something everyone can understand is that when these consoles launched, there were 1080p televisions, but they were not the norm. Now, if you own a high-def television, I don't think you can even go buy a 720p only TV.
Yeah.
You own 1080p. Yeah. And your consoles cannot output in 1080p. Now, the PS3 can, but only for movies.
Yeah.
For Blu-rays, obviously, have to output 1080p. But the games max out at 720p. So that's kind of how outmoded all that is that we don't. Your current consoles can't even use the full extent of what your TV can do.
Yeah, and it should say last night I went on YouTube and I decided, because I was so excited with all this PlayStation 4 stuff that I wanted to see, rewatch the 2005 E3 press conference where Sony unveiled the PS3 just to remind myself of what that was like. And that was a bizarre experience because it made me realize, 2005 was 8 years ago. It was really different 8 years ago.
Yeah,
that press conference was terrible compared to their modern press conference. And this is everything was terrible about it. It made me realize, if you ever want to realize how fucking great video games are now, watch an old console reveal with how excited everyone is about the technology, and then you see the game demos and you're like, that looks awful, holy shit.
Yeah.
And if you want to be even more excited about what the PS4 will be able to do in the future, watch how shitty those tech demos are compared to what PS3 games actually were 2 years after the console came out.
Yeah.
It makes you even more excited for seeing what the PS4 games look like that they showed off, and what they will actually look like when they're full proper games that come out.
Especially because this is a system which we will talk about a lot more in depth later that is very, very catering to developers.
Yeah, definitely.
So sort of that's some background, and I guess we need to go off on that too. We've mentioned a couple times that Sony had a difficult launch for the PS3.
Yeah.
And I think we need to set that groundwork too, because I think that was on everyone's minds the day of this press conference.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because going into the PS3, Sony was by far the dominant force in the console market. The PS2 sold insanely well. It was in everybody's homes. They were a huge force in popularizing the DVD movie format. That was extreme. The Sony was by far, the top dog in the game. And you could really, when I was rewatching that press conference, you could really feel that Sony was feeling that power. That Sony, it's a very sort of classical example of sort of Greek hubris.
Yeah.
Where they came out, they were very confident, most of their press conference was about, look how much we've sold, look how popular the PlayStation 2 is, this is the PlayStation 3, this is going to be the biggest thing ever, we're going to make Blu-rays are going to be the biggest thing ever, and that actually worked out.
Yeah.
But there was they announced so much stuff that just didn't even happen with the PS3 there, that they were so confident and so arrogant and so overconfident that they ended up creating a console that was extremely difficult to develop for. They created what is the cell processor, which is a proprietary format unique to the PlayStation 3 and their CPU. And while I believe, I'm not a huge technical guy. I'm not a computer engineer. But from everything that I understand about the cell processor is that it technically is very, very powerful, but it's such a unique and strange piece of hardware that almost nobody knows how to develop for it. And that's why the only games that take advantage of what the PS3 can do are first-party developers. And luckily Sony has quite a few of them. But any sort of, multi-platform game on the 360 and PS3, even though the PS3 is more powerful, chances are that a multi-platform game actually looks better on the 360 because nobody's able to take advantage of that cell processor.
Yeah.
And so, going into with the PS3, they sort of really emphasized the power. Everything at that press conference was all graphs and charts and just talking about, look how amazing this is, this piece of tech. This is going to be the biggest thing we're delivering, movie level graphics, which is complete bullshit. They had a bunch of demos with Spider-Man 2, and it that press conference was awful, full of lies and promises that they couldn't achieve, and just complete arrogance.
Yeah, I think they were assuming PS2, biggest console in history. I think it always will be the highest selling console in history. There's no way something's going to ever outsell that.
Yeah, I think so too. It sort of was in a very special place.
And it's just sort of that, again, hubris of, PS2, everyone has one, everyone loves one. We can all agree that was a great piece of hardware. So we slap a 3 on this one, show that we've made upgrades, and everyone will come to it, even if we price it at $700.
Yeah.
Which that leads into the commercial side of the PS3's launch. But you were going to say something else, so
yeah. There's so much at that press conference that I found so fascinating looking back on it now.
Yeah.
They really emphasized the backwards compatibility element of it, which
That, if you don't know, the PS3 was out of the box backwards compatible with the PS2. They took that feature out for later pressings of the main PS3 console and the 2 Slim versions.
Yeah, because they had to do that. It natively. I did not know this at the time, but when I was looking into it, the original version of the PS3 actually had the Emotion Engine chip, which is the CPU for the PS2.
Yeah.
So it natively emulated PS2 games, but that basically meant you had a PS2 inside of your PS3, and so that is one of the main reasons why that console cost so damn much when it came out.
Yeah.
And so Sony really was holding on to that backwards compatibility thing, because I believe the PlayStation 2 is actually the first console that was backwards compatible, because it was the first second generation disc-based console.
Right, because obviously the GameCube couldn't do N64.
Yeah. Obviously, none of the cartridge-based consoles could be backwards compatible.
The Atari 7600 was backwards compatible. I don't know if that counts, but...
Yeah, I don't... Like, Atari consoles are so, that's not, the same thing. I
just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, sure.
But, anyway... So and they had to take that out eventually because, in part, it was just a commercial move. The PS2 was outselling the PS3,
Yeah, it was... the PS2 was so fucking amazing that even when Sony made their PS3 and made it so powerful... Nobody gave a shit because people were still buying the PS2.
Yeah, well, let's get into the launch of the PS3 then. It comes out, and it has a pretty tough launch.
Yeah, it definitely... Microsoft made a very smart move in having the Xbox 360 launch 1 year ahead of the PS3, so they already sort of had their foundation done, and even though there weren't a lot of... Because, most consoles do not have particularly good launches in terms of software.
Yeah.
Most consoles do not have a lot of really good games come out for their software launch. I mean, honestly, the Wii U, as terrible software lineup as that is for someone who is a core gamer and has other consoles, that's still, maybe the most impressive software lineup for a launch I've seen, the 4 consoles that have come out in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And so, the 360 was able to, since they had that year, by the time the PS3 came out, the 360 had a solid lineup of software that came out over that year, and the PS3 was still dealing with their shortage of launch title software. There was no killer app when the PS3 came out. There's no really great game that you had to have the PS3 to buy. And so, and it was, like you said, there are 2 SKUs. I believe it was $500 and $600 when it came out. And that was extremely expensive. The Xbox 360 was $300 and $400 for its 2 SKUs. And so, the PS3, just when it came out, it just did not have the software to justify its price. And its price was really extreme, and most people already owned an Xbox 360 if they were really dedicated gamers. And so only the really hardcore Sony guys really bought into PS3 when it came out. Also, the PS3 had a lot of issues with sort of its PlayStation Network when it first launched, was very unstable, it just did not have the suite of features that Xbox Live did, because Xbox Live was much more successful on the original Xbox when they debuted it there, and sort of Microsoft was able to learn its lessons there. So, in a lot of ways, even though the Xbox 360 was a technically inferior machine, Microsoft was able to make some really key business decisions and had a leg up in sort of the networking capabilities, and that meant that the PS3 was really lagging behind in what was critically important.
Yes.
And so, but, since then, Sony has... It took them a little bit, but then Sony eventually was able to, sort of very recently in the past 2 or 3 years, with the debut of PS Plus, with the PS Vita, with these new initiatives, with relaunching the PlayStation Store. Basically, after they got fucked in the ass when they got hacked, and everything went down for 2 months.
Well, it's interesting because before that hacking, PS3 was already on the upswing. The launch of the first PS3 Slim was an important moment for them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's when I bought a PS3. I know a lot of people jumped on board then. They definitely saw an uptick with that. It was a good sort of relaunch moment, because the original PS3 was this huge fucking behemoth.
Yeah.
We didn't even go into the fact that the original DualShock 3 had no rumble.
That is a good point.
All those things.
It had PS6-axis that when it launched, they really, really leveraged the, this thing has a gyroscope in it and you can tilt the controller, but no game has ever taken care of, use that in a way that's everybody really wants it. It's this is such a key function.
Yeah, I have one game that uses it, and it's kind of interesting, and it works technically fine, but it's not essential, obviously.
There's that one, game called Lair that came out, I think, a year after the PS3 that was supposed to be this is going to be one of the killer apps. It was a game where you're a dude who flies dragons, but the dragon, it was only controllable by the 6-axis, so you had to tilt the controller to move the dragon, and by all reports, that game was almost completely unplayable because of that 6-axis.
Well, anyway,
killed it.
Right, so the PS3 Slim was sort of a soft relaunch of the console, and during all this time, the fact that it had Blu-ray was a huge asset to it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of what kept it afloat.
Yeah, because, Sony was able to pull off what they did with the DVD and have the PS3 help popularize the Blu-ray movie format. And since that was, the dawn of the HD era, anybody who was sort of a cinephile and wanted to have the new, most technologically advanced movie collection would move to Blu-ray. Blu-ray just completely destroyed HD DVD to the point where everybody forgets that HD DVD was even ever a thing. And so, that was one of the things that, a vast majority of people really bought the PlayStation 3 for.
Oh, yeah.
It was just because it was one of the cheapest and best Blu-ray players on the market at the time.
Yeah, it was, and it's a great one. I mean, it was a little more expensive than some of its contemporaries, but it did more.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
bought it and
also,
played games.
Because if you're looking at it as a Blu-ray player, you're looking at it to really buy it for one of its ancillary features. So that means that you have all this other stuff onto it that really justifies the cost.
I always this is just sort of anecdotal evidence, but I have a neighbor who's he's been retired for several years. He's an older gentleman, and he owns a PS3. I don't even think he's probably ever taken out the controller, but he has a PS3 because he wanted to watch Blu-rays. And it's so it really, it was the exact same situation as the PS2. That was a really smart move for them, and it kind of kept them afloat. The hacking thing, though, was a real bump in the road.
Yeah.
And it took them, but you have to give them props for picking themselves up after that and doing everything in their power to be like, you know what, we're proud of this piece of hardware. Yeah. We really do have a good infrastructure. Let's rework it. Let's make people believe this. And I've been converted. They've done a great job.
Yeah, I think Sony, sort of in the latter years of the PS3, has done incredibly impressive in being able to move that console back to where it is definitely on par, if not superior, to the Xbox 360. It has all the features that you'd want. It has PS Plus, which is a much better service than the Xbox Live. It gives you so much more for less.
Yeah.
And so, the Sony has been on an upward swing. It's got a lot of momentum behind it going into the press conference, and man, are they able to keep that momentum and keep it going hard coming out of this press conference.
So that's sort of the background. That's what they're carrying into the conference. And if anything, this is probably their most impressive showing since the days of the PS2.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's get started. Where are we just going to go down the outline?
Yeah, I think I want to start, since we started with sort of laying the groundwork, sort of the vision and the what they were promising sort of at a high level with the PS4, what they were trying to do with the PS4. And I think one of the most interesting things is that when, the guy who came out to sort of give the main technical presentation of the PlayStation 4 to sort of talk about its technical features, what they were trying to do within the future, what they were emphasizing with this piece of hardware, was not was not Jack Tretton, the president of Sony Computer Entertainment America. It wasn't. I can't remember the name of the guy who's the president of the Sony Computer Entertainment proper, but it wasn't any of the really higher ups. When they announced the PS3, it was Ken Kutaragi, the president of Sony Computer Entertainment at the time. It was Kaz Hirai, the president of Sony Computer Entertainment America at the time. They were the guys out there talking about the console. They were the big higher ups, top level CEOs, presidents talking about their consoles. But the guy who came out to talk about the PlayStation 4 was not like that. They had the lead architect, a man named Mark Cerny, who is an absolutely fascinating person if you look into his past. He's a really, really well-respected video game developer. He started developing for Atari when he was 17 years old.
Jesus.
And sort of he has been involved in the game. He's one of the very few people who has been in the video game market and able to sort of survive everything. He's survived the video game crash, the arcade crash in the 80s. He able to move to Sega, worked with them for a while. Then he was able to transfer over from the 2D era into the 3D era of video games. And he's worked on just tons and tons of amazing titles. He was one of the producers on Sonic the Hedgehog 2. He made the arcade game Marble Madness, was sort of his claim to fame in the arcade days. He made Naughty Dog and Insomniac real proper developers, because he was one of the guys he became the president of Universal Entertainment Interactive, and so he's he was the creating force behind sort of Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon.
Jeez.
He was one of the design consultants on Uncharted, God of War 3, Resistance 2, Killzone 3.
So every major PlayStation exclusive you think of.
Exactly. He has had his fingers in a lot of pies in Sony for a very long time, and he is an immensely well-respected developer. He gave a speech in 2002 at a DICE conference about sort of what he called method, or that's since been called Cerny method, that has sort of revolutionized a lot of video game production ideas. He is just one of the most interesting, influential, and just most intelligent video game developers out there, and he is critically a video game developer. Like, that is what he is, that is what he does, that is his profession. He's not a businessman, he's not a CEO, he's a guy who makes games, and that is his life, and that is his job.
It would be like bringing out Wozniak instead of Jobs.
Exactly, that is exactly. It would be like if Apple brought out the Woz to talk about the iPhone.
Right.
Which, kind of hope that would happen. But, yeah, but they brought out Mark Cerny, and that was by far my favorite part of the entire press conference, because sort of a lot of the tone of the press conference was not this, what you would expect of sort of a very bombastic, very almost sort of adolescent attitude that most press conferences have that make it kind of hard to watch for me, where they treat, the next video game console is going to be this world-shattering event. It is going to push the envelope and completely change everybody's lives forever, and it's going to change everything. This is the new status quo, motherfuckers. We can never go back, kind of thing. And this was a very sober, very mature, this is a console, this is what we're trying to do with it, this is our ideas, we want to make games, we want to make this entertaining, we want to make this usable, and it was just a very smart, mature, and just very intelligent sort of just discussion with the audience. And that was something that I extremely appreciated, because it's so hard. Because Mark Cerny is not a dude who just, toes the company line. He's not a dude who goes out there and tells you a bunch of bullshit. He's a guy who will go out there and tell you what it is, like it is.
What he has worked on.
Yeah, exactly. What he's worked on. He's the lead architect for the PlayStation 4. He's been working on it for 5 years. And that was... I think that just alone bringing out Mark Cerny sort of indicates what they're trying to do.
And I just want to say, this is the part of the press conference I saw, or parts of it. I tried to watch the conference, and I had a lot of issues with the streaming. Like, most of the sites showing it were down, and there was a lot of problems. So I saw a good chunk of the Mark Cerny portion, and I want to say, too, it was refreshing just to see someone out there who was just kind of a regular guy who just wanted to share stuff he was excited about.
Yeah, it is, and he's just a fantastic public speaker. I was just so impressed with that section of the press conference. But sort of the key part of what he talked about there with the PlayStation 4 was that they were extremely focused on developers and making it something that's very easy to develop for, and something that is very usable for the end user, for us, the gamers. And it actually reminded me a lot of the Steve Ballmer speech. I don't even think we ever really found out what it was from, but it was probably in 2002 or something. Steve Ballmer at a Microsoft event gave this speech, and it's a very famous moment from the speech that it has become sort of a viral video where Steve Ballmer's up there in very Steve Ballmer fashion. His armpits are just drenched in sweat, and he's just going, developers, 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 developers. He just says that for 15 times over and over, just emphasizing what is important in the software business are the developers, not the publishers, not the hardware makers. Those people have, parts to play. But what is key is the developers, and that is exactly the tone that they had here. Less bombastic, but it was basically that we are talking about developers here. This is what is important, and again, contrasting it to the 2005 press conference with the PS3, almost everybody they brought out at that press conference was a CEO of a company, either like NVIDIA, of Sony Computer Entertainment, of the America branch. Everybody they brought up there was a very high-up individual who was not necessarily the guy who's on the ground developing the games. Almost every single person they brought out at this conference was someone who has their fingers in the project, who's someone like Mark Cerny, or just like the lead developers of each of the individual games. Those were the guys who were coming out talking about what was going on. And so it is a complete 180 from that PS3 press conference of where they were like, this is the cell processor, this is going to be the most amazing piece of hardware ever, and you are going to make games for it, and you're going to like it because we are Sony, and this is what we do. And we have made a very impressive piece of hardware, we have made it very easy to develop for, and I think anybody who wants to make games would be very happy to work on this platform. That was the sort of attitude they had, and that is so much better.
Yeah,
much better.
Pitching it sort of in this dual sense to both developers and saying that not only the people on the stage are happy about it, and just showing that, hey, if you other people, you out there in the world want to make a game, here's what you can do, and here's why this is a good platform for you. But that also speaks to gamers in that, you say, hey, look, you like good games. We have a system that is designed so people can make really good games without limits, basically.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it'll be interesting to see going into the future, like sort of how they handle indie game development on the PlayStation 4, because I think that's going to be one of the key points going into the future. It's not something they talked about a whole lot. They brought out Jonathan Blow, he's a very famous indie developer, to talk about his game, and we'll talk about that later. But, the Xbox 360 sort of was able to do that first when they had Xbox Live Arcade, but first in the console market. But very quickly it became really apparent that Microsoft did not understand that you cannot necessarily charge the indie developers making games for your arcade, thousands of dollars just to bring out a patch. Yeah. It is a very arduous process to make a game come out on Xbox Live Arcade, and I think hopefully Sony will sort of see. I don't know the whole process for the PlayStation Network, but I know it is probably less difficult, but still equally hard to develop for. It's not like just putting a game out on Steam on the PC, which almost anybody can do as long as they have an impressive piece of software. So it'll be interesting to see, going to specifics with that developer focus, to see how broad that is. If it extends just beyond, we're making it very easy for our traditional stable of AAA developers to make games for, and then also expanding that out into if you are 4 dudes in a basement who have some background in programming, like making music and writing stories, that you could also make a game for our platform.
Yeah,
because it'll be interesting, and I hope the tone sort of indicates that will be the case, that they'll be sort of reaching their hand out to indie developers, trying to bring smaller games onto the console as well.
Yeah,
but it'll be interesting to see that part.
Okay, so what's next?
I think next, let's talk about what they talked about next, really, in the conference, which was the PlayStation 4 technical specs.
And this is very much where we get this sense of what they want the developers to have.
Yeah, definitely. Where and it's the key, again, a contrast to the 2005 conference, where that was about 50% of the entire conference was just them talking about the cell processor, just them talking about the NVIDIA chip that they have in the PS3, and just talking about the technical elements of it, which made it really boring to watch, because, that half of that stuff means almost nothing to me. And here they had a much more user-friendly focus on it, that, you don't need to know a ton about technical specifications. You don't need to know everything about CPUs and GPUs and RAM or whatever to figure out what they're talking about. They made it very easy to understand. But basically, the gist of it is that instead of using the cell processor, they flat out just admitted, the cell processor did not pan out for us. That was a pretty dumb thing that we did. It did not work. Instead, they're using an x86-based architecture in the CPU, which is basically a very standard sort of PC-style CPU. It's what the original Xbox had. It might actually be what the same framework that the Xbox 360 works on as well. And so that's that just alone indicates, we're making this easier to develop for. We're putting in an architecture that developers are already familiar with. So, guys who have not developed PlayStation games for 5 years will be able to come in and actually make games for our console that takes advantage of our console. And so that alone is really huge. But then sort of the most technically impressive, as far as I can understand of the technical side of it, that they talked about, was that the PlayStation 4 is going to have 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 unified memory. And what that basically is its RAM. So what the PlayStation 3 had and the Xbox 360 had as well is 512 megabytes of RAM. So as you can see, that alone is a 16 times increase of just the raw memory. But standard RAM that everybody sort of uses is DDR3, which is inferior to GDDR5, which is sort of the type of memory that is generally used in graphics cards. And basically, just what that means is that not only is it have 16 times just the raw capacity, it also is able to process and transfer that memory significantly faster. And by significantly faster, I mean 120 times faster than what DDR3 does.
Right. And what does memory translate to in the actual gameplay experience?
Basically everything. I mean, it'll allow you to do higher resolution textures. It'll sort of help prevent texture pop-in. So hopefully, Unreal Engine 4 is not going to have that really awkward thing that every Unreal Engine game has in this generation, where as soon as you load into a level, everything's all flat and ugly, and then texture slowly starts loading in. It'll be able to there'll just be able to be a lot more going on at the same time, because the console will just be able to process so much more, so much faster. And this is sort of the key thing, is that 512 megabytes of RAM was not enough specifically for the PS3, because they just weren't, that really restricted what you were actually able to do with it. And even on the PS3, it's more complicated than that, because they did not necessarily have it all just dedicated to graphical memory or system memory. They had it specifically split 50/50 where there's 256 megabytes were dedicated specifically to graphics and 256 were specifically dedicated to just system stuff. So that made it even more complicated. Like, that is specifically what made the PS3 version of Skyrim a broken piece of shit, because there just was not enough RAM because they were restricted by that. So having 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM is huge. That is by far, to me, the most technically impressive thing, but it's also one of the more disconcerting things, just because that's probably going to be really expensive. Like, I don't know how much is that going to translate to how much it's going to cost for us, but it's going to cost Sony quite a bit of change to put this much RAM into every single machine.
Yeah.
But, then just going off, I'm not going to really talk about they didn't really talk about the GPU type stuff that much. It's sort of a standard AMD type thing. But, so they do have it'll be able to play DVDs. It'll have a
Blu-ray drive.
Yeah, it'll have a Blu-ray drive, but instead of being the 2x CAV that was in the PS3, it's 6 times, so that probably means you won't have to install anything, because you'll actually just be able to read off the disc. So that'll be nice.
Yeah.
And, that's basically it. They're really talking a lot about how it is a PC-focused infrastructure. If you know how to develop games for PC, which like every developer does, because that's what you learn how to develop for, you will be able to develop for the PS4. They didn't really go into specifics that much for the actual hard drive stuff. They basically kind of said it's going to be built in, but they didn't go into specifics as how, if there's going to be a slot for an extra hard drive or something, how much memory it's going to have.
I'm sure it will be very big out of the box, though. They're probably going to want to push digital download, which means they're going to probably push at least 500 gigs.
Yeah, that's I'm guessing probably 500 gigs. Maybe even more for that than for the premium SKU.
Yeah, I mean, the PS3 actually has always had, relative to other pieces of hardware, a lot of storage. Like, when I bought the PS3 Slim, it had, I believe it has 120 or 160 gigabytes, which at the time was like, that's just built in? That's unbelievable, because I'm used to the Xbox 360 where you have to pay up the wazoo to get 20 gigs at the time.
Yeah, when the Xbox 360 launched at a 20 gig hard drive, but 8 gigabytes of that was not usable memory for you, so it was really a 12 gigabyte hard drive. That was shit.
That was shit, yeah. So anyway, back to the PS4.
And then also a notable thing that they kind of said and showed, but they never really talked about, which I think was a smart thing, is that there will be a stereoscopic camera that's basically the PlayStation 4i, or basically their equivalent of the Kinect, will be with the machine. They didn't talk about if it'll be bundled in, what exactly they're planning on using it for. I think there's some sense that there might be some voice recognition type stuff involved with that as well. But that's basically it. That's it's going to be in there somewhere. It's going to be sort of because also on the controller there is a light sensor similar to what is on the Move controller. The Move controller will be compatible with the PlayStation 4. Seems like that's just going to be used for that as well.
Yeah. And I think this is interesting. I think they definitely looked at Microsoft when they decided to not push this too heavy in this conference, because while Microsoft has technically sold a lot of Kinect, it has not been good for their image with gamers, where every single conference they've done since the launch of Natal has been almost entirely about the Kinect.
Yeah.
And when they still have not put out a good piece of software for it, that's tough, and that's a bad position to be in. And I think hopefully Microsoft looks at this and says, all right, at our conference, we do not talk about the Kinect more than 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That's,
and I don't think they're going to do that. I think that conference will be primarily about the Kinect.
I think that's going to be about 50% of the Microsoft conference is going to be whatever the Kinect 2 is.
Yeah, and I think that's going to turn a lot of people off.
Yeah, it's going to be a little worrying. I mean, that was one of the things overall about the PlayStation conference that I was really, really glad about, because going into it, I had some fears in the back of my mind of there might be some really some bullshit stuff in here, it's not going to have a disc drive, or it won't play used games, or it'll have some really dumb proprietary memory format or something just really awful like that, or we're going to it's going to be only motion based controls or something just crazy like that. That was always a possibility, because
Nintendo style.
Yeah, exactly. That somebody's going to do something crazy here, and that was. Going into it, those are sort of my biggest fears, is that they were not going to focus on just, the game aspect of it, but they focused on the game aspect of it here. Even, only, multimedia type stuff got, a passing mention. There's, Netflix apps will be there, Hulu apps will be here, these are, a panel of, a bunch of different logos, Crunchyroll, Amazon Instant Video, all the sort of video services you expect that are already on the PS3 and 360. That was, the extent of it. Yeah. I was really glad about that it's, we're not...
I was overjoyed by that.
Yeah, we're not pushing this, so hard at this meeting, this is going to be the center of the living room type thing, like everything you do will revolve around this. It's like, and those elements will be there, like it will have that capacity, but we're going to talk about the games because nobody cares that much about that capacity, particularly at like the announcement for the PlayStation 4.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about the controller, because I think the controller to me kind of defines a lot of what I found impressive about this conference, where there are a lot of creative ideas and things that in other scenarios could be construed as gimmicks, but it feels like everything they talked about at this conference played into their larger vision of the PlayStation 4 as just a really smart, powerful piece of gaming hardware.
Yeah.
You know, and even the little bit they talked about the PlayStation I, it's stuff that I found kind of cool too. It's like, I don't know how much I would use that, but it's the kind of thing where I'm like, in the way they're presenting it, I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, and especially if it's packaged in with the console, that seems cool.
Yeah.
It seems like you could do, as long as you're not using it like too much, it could add a lot of really just cool little things that you could do with games.
Yeah, so that's transferred to the DualShock 4. Basically, we did have a prototype image leak a couple days before
that was accurate. Like that was basically almost exactly what the controller looked like.
They cleaned it up a lot though. Like that final version looks
it was like visually it was clearly a prototype, but functionally it had everything that was on the actual controller we were shown.
Yes, and the actual controller we were shown, I think, is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I really like it. It's got, it still has the basic DualShock look to it. Both of the analog sticks are still on the lower axis, like all the PlayStation controllers have been. They still have the 4 face buttons with like X, square, circle, and triangle. But
D-pad, R1, R2.
Yeah, and so all that stuff is as you would expect, but it's sort of, let's just talk about like the little changes before we get into the big stuff. The sticks are concave now, like with the Xbox 360, which that's a big thing for me because that's maybe the thing I disliked the most about the PlayStation controllers has been their analog sticks, which I just have no grip on them. Like my fingers always slip off those analog sticks because they're not concave.
Yeah.
And so that looks awesome. The controller itself looks so much more substantial and sort of weighty, where the DualShock 3 sort of feels a little plasticky and flimsy to me, at least.
Yeah, and so it's kind of small. And this one, it's definitely the handles are a little bigger. They're more fit to someone's hands.
Yeah.
It's a little bigger, and they've kind of expanded the middle part of it, so your fingers will probably not touch using the analog sticks.
Yes, which, again,
you're excited for.
Yeah, it's just like the weird little detail I had completely forgotten about when I was playing Journey, but yeah. It looks like it has a built-in battery like the PlayStation 3 controller does. So
probably run on Bluetooth.
Yeah, that's as to be expected. It does have a little speaker in it. I saw they didn't talk much about that, but that seems kind of cool. And it had a headphone jack.
Yeah, for your headset, or I presume you just plug headphones in.
Yeah, which that's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I've always wanted that because. Yeah, sometimes you don't necessarily, if you like playing a game late at night and you're living with someone else, you don't necessarily want to have like the audio turned up really high. But if you're playing a game that you're like has really good music or something, you don't want to have audio really low. So
just plug in your headphones.
This is one of my favorite things about just PC gaming. Is it's like you can just put in a headset and everything sounds really amazing.
So I mean, and I think those little touches, they're little, but they're important to note because they're all like someone put thought into this. Did not have any hubris. Just looked at the controller and said, "Hey, where are areas where we can improve, and what are things we know people would like to have?"
Yeah.
So just a little headphone jack doesn't change your experience with the controller at all.
Yeah.
But it just means it's there and you can use it, and it's really easy.
Like I like even Mark Cerny when he was talking about the controller made this really just like one sentence passing mention at like when they were redesigning the controller, they took advantage to like improve a lot of little things like controller latency. I just like how it's just like he like that's one of the things I liked about his presentation. You just throw out this like little nugget. It's like not something that's like really important, but controller latency. It's like if you're using a wireless controller, technically the signal is going to be slower than using a wired controller. And for most people, that's not a big deal. But if you play a lot of fighting games or something like that, where precise control is really important, fighting game people do not like to use wireless controllers because there is more controller latency. So just like lots of little details like that were really, really nice. The triggers looked a little bit better. The triggers are really weird on the PlayStation 3 controller. I don't even know how to they feel kind of spongy. I don't know how to describe them.
These look like more like the Xbox 360. They're not quite the like sort of thin strip kind of thing.
Yeah, they're a little bit wider, but they look a lot nicer. We haven't been able to use the controller, so we don't. Like, they might be pieces of shit, too, but it doesn't look like it, so that's encouraging.
Yeah.
But then, to talk about the more substantial additions to the controller, I think, first of all, it does have a front touchpad that looks like it's basically the same as the back touchpad on the PS Vita.
Yes.
That's just sort of like smack dab in the middle of the controller. And it's sort of interesting because they almost didn't talk about that feature at all at the press conference. Like they said, it's there. This is we have a touchpad there, but they never used it. They never demonstrated using it for anything. So I don't know quite what it even is they're planning on it to be used for. Clearly it can be used for menus. Maybe it could be used for if you have, a different, a real-time strategy game or something like that really needs to use a mouse. That could help that for slightly more precise control.
Well, and I think for me, it's I don't know if I need it to do anything more than that. I think just, you talked about this the other day, that navigating, just the store, let's say.
Yeah.
That's something very easy to do on the internet on your computer.
Yeah.
Because you have a mouse and a keyboard, or even a little trackpad on your MacBook, and it's very easy to do. It's totally user friendly. Stores on consoles have always been a little clunky. The Xbox 360 is completely clunky.
Yeah.
The PSN store is really good, but it's still a little clunky because you just have this controller and you have to just move around with your sticks.
Yeah.
But you throw a touchpad on there, that makes that immensely easier.
Yeah, definitely. So, in stuff just navigating a Netflix interface.
Yeah.
That will they'll just all those people will just be able to make those interfaces much, much better because they don't have to sort of retrofit it onto this really unwieldy way of managing menus.
Yeah, so. And I think it's interesting to me because obviously touchpads are sort of the way of the future.
Yeah.
And that's the place people are heading, and I think Nintendo, to me, kind of overcompensated in building their entire controller around a literal touch screen.
Yeah.
But this is not going to drive up the cost of the controller all that much. It's there. You can ignore it if you want, but it's there. It's going to work really well, because I can attest the Vita touchpad on the back is great. It works really well, and it's very helpful for little things here and there. And, it's an extra little thing that there's no reason not to include it.
Yeah.
So have it there.
And interestingly enough, when they, after the press conference, they released, two sheets that were basically one was the PS4 specifics of the specs, and then there was another one that was the specifics of the controller, containing little things like the projected weight and stuff like that. And talking about the touchpad, it did say it has 2-touch sensitivity. So, and the Wii U gamepad doesn't. It has 1-touch sensitivity, which is kind of interesting. So theoretically, there'll be sort of pinch and zoom type stuff will be there for that touchpad, which is very encouraging. Also for browsing the internet or something like that would be much easier if you have something like that.
That's something I forget, but the PlayStation 3 was the first home console to have an internet browser.
Yeah.
So
expect that feature to also be in the PlayStation 4 somewhere. And then also it also serves as a button. It's pressable. So which solves another thing of one of my quibbles when I saw the controller was that it does not have start or select buttons. It has an options button that has the share button, which we'll talk about. And so I was like, wait, but that's what? Where's pause? Maybe pressing that is pause. Well, it'll be interesting to see if that is sort of standard what that's going to be used for in most games, but
it feels like the kind of thing too because it extends the whole width of the main bridge.
Yeah.
That you could just anywhere on it, you could probably just tap it and then you get to pause, and that's a little easier than maybe just going for the specific start button.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So they did not lose a button. That was what I was really worried about when they put the share thing on there and they dropped start and select. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's a lot of games don't necessarily use those, but some games do, and they're kind of important for some how am I ever going to access the map really quickly in most games if there is no select button kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got mainly that touchpad. There's also the main PlayStation button on the bottom, like you're used to on the DualShock 3 and the Vita.
So basically, the Xbox Dual type thing, for main interface, just going out to whatever the version of the dashboard will be called.
And then, sort of on the top of the bridge, right hand side, we have the options key, which will likely be like a start kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the share button, and this is where things get interesting.
Yeah, this is sort of their big new feature. It was when the prototype got leaked, everyone saw this button labeled share and were like, what the fuck is this? And there were some worries of, oh god, this is going to be the Facebook machine, isn't it? Kind of thing. And, and that is part of it. It has, one of their other main focuses beyond being developer and user-friendly was to really heavily expand the social functionality of the machine, which is a very predictable move. I fully expect the Xbox 360 to do something similar in that regard, just because, when these consoles came out, MySpace was still a thing, and there was not this sense of sort of this one hub. There wasn't this sense that you have your Facebook profile, and now every website has, you can just sign in using your Facebook profile kind of thing.
Right.
There's this sense of connectivity, and that you have this singular online identity that is tied to your actual physical self in a way that's you have your real name on your Facebook page.
Right, and I mean, I'm really excited to talk about all the social aspects of the PS4 because I think what a lot of maybe cynics of all this talk at the conference are forgetting is that gaming is social now. That is one of the primary purposes of gaming.
And it always has been. That's always, back in the arcade days, motherfucker, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was always the machine I would go to because it had my friends. Everyone. You have 4 turtles. There are 4 turtles. Turtle video game, you need 4 people.
Yeah.
Video games have always had a very strong social aspect. That's what, the entire fighting game genre was built on people going to arcades and playing Street Fighter 2 with, random people or their friends at the arcades.
And gaming, in many ways, is more social than ever now because it's embraced the internet.
Yeah.
And I think the way PS4 wants to push these social aspects is the smartest way to go about that.
Yeah, to fully integrate it into the console in, an operating system level that they have. But then also in a way that, they didn't, specifically say... I mean, they have basically said it after the fact of post-conference. But, if you're like me and your preferred way of gaming is I want to sit down, in the dark and play an RPG for 20 hours and just completely destroy myself, you can do that. You don't you don't have to interact with it. You can, turn off all the social extra widgets and stuff if you so desire. But if you're also someone who, wants to take advantage of those features... They are all there, and most people are going to want to take advantage of those features. I think the only people who are really cautious of that are people who are really into video games that really like to play a lot of single-player video games and stuff like that, and that is not the majority of the market.
And even then, you're probably going to still use 1 or 2 of these features.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like I'm going to forever shut myself off from the PlayStation Network and, never play multiplayer
Turn off
games.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Break the Ethernet port.
Yeah, just, break open the box, pull the fucking Wi-Fi just out of the machine. Yeah.
But anyway, so let's get back to the share button. What does this share button do, Sean?
I think, for me personally, the coolest fucking thing it does is that the PlayStation 4 internally can render video and output it to the internet.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so when you press the share button, what they showed was basically it pauses the game, instantaneously backs you out to a menu. They had 3... options there. One was upload video, one was upload, or take video, take screenshot, and then upload or something like that. And so they showed when they went to the upload video, you could scrub through. It was 15-second time intervals or something like that. They didn't go into details of really specific stuff of how much video would you be able to record and render. How robust is it? Are you able to email it to yourself? Are you able to post it privately to websites, or is it only specifically you can post it Facebook or YouTube and stuff like that? They didn't go into really deep specifics. You wouldn't necessarily expect them to, but they showed you can scrub through at least I mean they did do it with the Killzone demo of there's an 8-minute video, and at the end of the demo they shared that to Facebook and live. As soon as they did that, I was well, I haven't been on Facebook in 3 months, but I'm going to check this out. Went to Facebook, went to the Killzone page, and it was up there, a full 8-minute video.
That's crazy.
That might be, technical, stuff behind the scenes. Maybe the technology can't quite do it yet. You can't necessarily take it completely on face value. That's what you're going to get out of the box. Be able to take 8-minute videos. It's and it looked really nice too. It wasn't compressed to shit or anything like that. It was full high definition.
Well, and I think there's definitely a possibility that this will be a feature that everyone will be able to use, but the more advanced elements of it will be a PlayStation Plus.
Yeah, I definitely expect some of the stuff that, if you want to go further than 3 minutes back or something like that, you're going to have to be a PlayStation Plus subscriber. They didn't, that is one key thing that I should mention before I forget about, is that they did not go into any specifics about their online service. They did not, necessarily confirm that it will remain free. They didn't talk about what expanded features PlayStation Plus would have or anything like that. I mean, I expect the basic features to be free like it was for the PlayStation 3, and that they would expand PlayStation Plus and add extra functionality for share and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was a dumb rumor the other day where they were saying they were going to rebrand PlayStation Plus as PlayStation World and all internet features would be paid.
I really don't think that's plausible.
No, because they showed the PlayStation Plus brand name all the fuck over that conference.
That is true. Yeah,
they're not changing it.
Yeah, it would be really, because it is such a huge sort of marketing thing for them. Such good word of mouth comes out of that PlayStation Plus service because it's such good service.
Yeah,
they're not going to get rid of it.
And they were also throwing around the name PlayStation Network a lot. They're not rebranding these things.
Yeah, exactly. They're keeping their ecosystem.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised if a PlayStation Plus membership is increasingly important to have to use your PS4.
Yeah,
but it's definitely
going to have expanded features because the PlayStation 4 does.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, compared to having to pay $60 a year for Xbox Live for the just most simple, like just having play Netflix on the machine.
Yeah,
if you want to have extra share functionality, PlayStation Plus, go ahead.
Yeah.
And so, the other share stuff is that there were, you could clearly take screenshots using that as well. And then other interesting stuff, I don't know how, like this is another thing that they did not really go into specifics with, but is sort of tied into their social, ideas, is that they will feature service-level live streaming, and they did show that they're playing the game Knack, which was Mark Cerny's new game that he showed off, that, having it properly live streamed, there's, a video, there's, a fucking chat window on the right, in the corner, there's, a little, video in videos thing of, some girl with, a headset playing the game. And that seems really interesting. They did not go into specifics of how that would work. They did say they are partnering with Ustream specifically, so Twitch TV is, shitting its pants right now because it's oh, well, fuck.
Yeah.
If Ustream got the exclusive deal with PlayStation. So, maybe Xbox is going to have an exclusive thing with Twitch TV and just expand out the live streaming wars. But that seems really fascinating. It seems like they're trying to get it because sort of esports are kind of becoming a thing, not really in the console world. StarCraft 2 and League of Legends are really big esports scenes online. They're really popular. I've watched some StarCraft 2 games off of esports, and it's really interesting.
People die doing it in Korea.
Yeah, it's it is life and death kind of shit.
Yeah.
But that's one of the features that I'm most interested to see the specifics of, that we'll probably learn a lot more about at E3 when they're able to go really in detail after getting this sort of base level stuff out of the way, is exactly how much is the share stuff going to work? How much video can you take? Where can you upload it? Is there... I think there was... I did see when I rewatched the conference, there was a little button that did say edit or something like that. It seems or I think it said trim video. So not necessarily, something that's fully featured as edit properly, on there, plain to see. But it seems like there will be some, maybe basic editing features. It'll be really interesting to see how functional that is, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
just the idea of, having basically what is the Halo 3 theater mode console-wide is something I've wanted for a very long time.
I know, I mean,
it's easy to use.
Sounds
amazing.
If the share button for me just took screenshots, I would even be happy with that, because one of my favorite things on, let's say, the iPhone, iPad, and my Mac is that I can take a screenshot of anything.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's nice about, PC gaming. It's just you can just set F12B screenshot, and there you go. Screenshot saves it to Steam.
And I love having screenshots of those things, and I've always been kind of sad that the 360 and PS3 I just can't do that on.
Yeah.
And the 360, my favorite, the Halo games, those have that function, but you have to go into the theater mode, find where you were, find the right screenshot, and then take it, and then upload it to Bungie's proprietary.
It's a big hassle trying to get that stuff off of there. You have to have a paid service to be able to actually render the the clips you take and stuff like that. It's really cool to have specifically in the Halo games because nothing else did that. But as soon as that happened, you're this needs to be everything. This needs to be everywhere. This needs to be a console level thing that just works on the console.
That developers don't need to worry about.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have to take a year out of their development time to build in this infrastructure for it to record video like that. And so that's awesome. That is maybe my favorite extra little thing. The coolest idea that there's so much potential for that. That and the live streaming. Just being in having clearly with the video in video thing that the person playing the live stream will be able to talk having that'll be hopefully will kind of change the Let's Play scene. There will be gaming personalities will hopefully flock to that and make that an interesting thing. If you just kind of want to sit back and watch someone who's really funny play a really dumb video game, you can just do that for 30 minutes and just have that fun, just kill some time. That seems a really cool way of expanding out that kind of stuff.
And, it's sort of like anything that's cool on the internet where they make it easier for people. Maybe there are some really funny people out there who like to play games, or really insightful people who have never gotten to share that because they don't have the technical know-how.
Yeah, because it is a hassle and it's expensive to be able to record, capture video off of these consoles.
I know just you and me, we'd love to do some videos like that, but we don't have the technology.
Yeah. So
you've heard the audio quality of this podcast.
Exactly, yeah.
But do we want to talk more about the social aspects of it while we're on this?
Yeah, I think so. I think let's go deeper into that. They did show Facebook and Twitter logos on the conference, so there will be probably Facebook, Twitter apps that I imagine will be much more fully integrated. They did it seemed like there's basically going to be a social network type thing, just specifically tied into the PlayStation Network and your PlayStation Network account.
Yeah, there's a new network they're starting. You use your own name, like Facebook. You can pre-fill it with info from Facebook or Twitter, but it's its own thing.
Yeah, so if you don't want to, like me, you can just be like, I will, I will fill out what I want to fill out, just specifically of that stuff, and I don't necessarily want to tie this to any other account.
Right. And then this will work across your Vita, all your smartphones, tablets, computers, so you can access this anywhere and really have an integrated gaming social network. And that excites me. And I didn't think that would excite me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
I think definitely agree.
I think it's a cool idea because we've talked about this a lot before, and we won't go into detail here. Facebook is not going to be around forever. Yeah. And I don't even think
probably not that much longer.
It's not going to be around. I think once the PS4 passes the torch to the PS5, Facebook will be gone.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
By then, Jesus.
Yeah.
Facebook will be forgotten like MySpace is now.
Yeah. I mean, people think because Facebook has all these subscribers that it's around forever. No,
MySpace had all those subscribers.
Yeah.
Back 5 years, back when E3 fucking 2005 happened, the PS3 was a thing. MySpace was a thing.
And MySpace
not a thing anymore.
Nope. And so, you kind of have to I think it's really smart to, instead of relying on these other people's networks and things, which always makes it clunky.
Yeah.
No matter what, we'll make that clunky. Make your own thing. And Sony, I think that's a really neat thing, and it looked like some of the features they had and the layout looked very clean, looked very usable, and just a way to further implement these social ideas of gaming.
Yeah. That was actually one of the things I was most fascinated by. The thing I was least expecting to see at this conference was a peek at the user interface. Because that always seems like that is going to be the last thing they do is finalize that user interface. Obviously that's not necessarily indicative of what it will look like out of the box, but all
right, sorry, we just had to take a quick pause because I'm getting weird viral marketing things in the mail for the movie Stoker, and this one was a box of pencils, and I cut myself on the box of pencils with a pencil, and I think I have a graphite splinter now. So I'm bleeding, but we're going to keep talking about the PS4, which...
To be fair, saying you're bleeding sounds a little bit overdramatic.
I'm not really bleeding,
what's happening.
No,
there is a slight spot of blood on a paper towel.
Yeah, that's all. But anyway...
It's not like your thumb is cut open and you're bleeding out on the table or something.
All I'm saying is, the PS4 marketing so far, I'm more interested in this stupid Stoker viral marketing.
Yeah, they didn't send you a bunch of sharpened pencils.
I already wanted to see Stoker. I don't need the fucking pencils. All right. So, Sean, back to PS4. You were talking about the user interface. We saw some of it. It looked pretty clean and nice.
Yeah. I liked how it looked, and there's this interesting shot of this sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. It almost seemed like a Facebook wall, but much more robust. It reminds me of a very specific website. It's not coming to mind what it is, but it's basically a bunch of different little boxes that had little information so and so is playing this game. This so and so downloaded this. And this that kind of stuff. Just a wall of information that sort of updates on the fly. And that seemed you could tie a lot of interesting stuff into that. Presumably, I would guess that you could access that in the middle of a game using the PlayStation home button or whatever you would call it.
Yeah.
And it seems if you could tie your Twitter feed into something like that seems that would be pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah. Specify certain people's tweets that would show up on that. So yeah, there's a lot of potential in the social functionality for the PlayStation 4 that I'm really excited about. In a way that I would not expect to be, because I'm not the kind of guy who takes advantage. Again, I'm the kind of guy who plays a lot of single-player games, very long RPGs, stuff like that is sort of my favorite type of gaming experience. But
I feel if you want to play with other people, this is going to be easier than ever to just
and just having the functionality there, if I ever should take advantage of it, is sort of reassuring. And knowing that they're not going to beat you over the head with it, because at this conference they didn't beat you over the head with it. This was this is maybe 15 minutes of the conference about what is really the most interesting and innovative feature of the console. I think is other than there's some other stuff that we'll talk about, but the idea of live streaming and being able to record and render video just on a console level is really fascinating. Something that you can't even. That is something that console would be able to do that PCs would not be able to do easily. You can't just you have to buy expensive software to be able to do that on a PC, and you have to learn how to use that specific piece of software. It's not as easy just hitting a button and kicking it out to YouTube.
Yeah, and I think it just means that if you are excited about gaming and the games you would like to play and you want to share that with other people, and that's something that is so fun about gaming, is discovering something and talking about it and seeing what other people are up to. You can do it really easily, including watching other people play the game you're making other people watch what you're playing, or even kicking it out to friends and saying all right, you watch me, what am I doing wrong? Or if you want to, you can have them remote play your fucking game.
Yeah, that was one of the more interesting things. Again, something that they did not go into really great detail about the specifics of it, and I think this will use this to transition into this whole portion of the conference, which is the Gaikai portion. But they did talk about there's going to be this feature where other people can basically be able to, stream the gameplay to you, and you will be able to control the game with your controller if they're like, if there's someone like you who doesn't even know how to buy the bandolier in Red Dead Redemption, and you're like, hey, Sean, I keep on running out of ammo, what am I doing wrong? And I'm like, hey, fucking dumbass, you fucking take the just give me the fucking controller, I'm gonna go to Armadillo and buy you a fucking bandolier, you
but over
dumbass.
The internet.
Exactly, over the internet, so I don't, which is unfortunate because I can't go in like real life and just slap you across the face and be like, you have got to be kidding me, you've played this entire game without the bandolier.
I will never escape this, will I?
No, you won't. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen someone do in a video game. That was incredible.
Yeah.
But you see, the PlayStation 4 is fixing these problems. They're fixing idiots like you. They're giving you means to find help.
Thank you, Sean. Anyway, so...
Did you know, I don't want to bring everything in my life back to Persona, but the idea of using some of this functionality with a future Persona game sounds kind of fucking awesome.
Yeah, because to me, one of the most fun things about Persona is playing it with a friend.
Yeah,
and just talking about it.
Just because it's a single player game, but it's such an interesting game, it's such an interesting story, such likable and fun characters that it's really fun to talk about what's going on in the game.
Yeah.
And then also, talk about, the ridiculous personas you can make and how much you can break the game with, you have, some dumb combination of, some guy who's resistant to physical and fire and enemies can't hurt you or something. Persona's the most recent example in my life, but there are so many games like that are single-player games. Skyrim is another good example. It's this single-player game, but a huge part of what's fun about it is to talk to other people who are playing that game and being able to sort of have that functionality of actually being able to watch someone else playing the game. So it's if you're playing Persona 6 and I'm playing Persona 6 and you're like, do check this out, to check out this dumbass shit I'm doing, I can pause my game, kick out of it, go to the main interface, hopefully bring up your live stream or whatever and see what dumb shit you ran into. Look at all this, this is completely ridiculous.
And I think the PS4 more than any other console is going to have those kinds of games that will take best advantage of that.
And we should say this part of the conference is the most speculative part. It is not something that they showed a lot of functionality of, and so our talking about these features, take all of this with a grain of salt. This is the part of the conference you need to take with a grain of salt more than anything else because it is the most sort of pie in the sky sort of stuff they were talking about here. But moving into that, the technology that they're using to do this is last year Sony bought a smaller company called Gaikai that sort of was working with a bunch of streaming services trying to figure out how to stream video games to consoles. So when Sony bought them up, everyone kind of had an idea. Sony's looking into doing something with streaming similar to the OnLive service that we talked a little bit about in the last podcast. And so after Mark Cerny stepped off the stage, I can't remember the guy's name, but the president of Gaikai came out and he started talking about the integration of the streaming features and that's how some of the live stream stuff is going to work. And this was the most interesting part, but also the part, again, that, don't know quite how it's going to work. It was a lot of, slides and stuff like that, of not really showing it integrated. There was a lot of talk about this, these services are going to be rolled out and expanded on into the future and might not necessarily be available out of the box. But this is where they addressed sort of the biggest negative point and the most troubling thing about the PlayStation 4 is that it will not be backwards compatible at all. Yeah,
it will not play any of your PlayStation 3 PSN games, none of your PS1 classics, none of your PS2 classics, and no PS3 games digital or on disc.
Yeah, or PS2 or PS1 games on disc.
On disc, well, yeah, obviously, yeah.
But yeah, so it's not going to have any backwards compatibility, which is understandable, particularly for PS3 games because it doesn't have a cell processor. So emulating that, I imagine, would have to be crazy hard to do.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but they did talk about, I would expect the PS1 Classics type stuff would probably be emulated at some point on a software level in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember the
PS2 Classics.
Yeah, the Vita did not play PS1 Classics out of the box either. They had it on there for almost all the PS1 Classics by the end of the year.
Yeah. So that type of stuff will probably, for downloadable titles, will probably roll out. I would not expect any PlayStation 3, specifically PSN titles to ever come over just because they're still built on the PlayStation 3 infrastructure. It doesn't matter if they're on a Blu-ray or not.
Yeah,
they're not going to emulate that way. But they did talk about the Gaikai service and this thing. I have no idea how this is going to work. If it's going to work well or what. But possibly in the future, you would, instead of, having downloading the game and having to have the actual hardware emulate the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, or PlayStation 3, they would just stream the game to you and just have your PlayStation 4 act as a client, and you just interact that way and have all of the emulation shit going on in the cloud, on Sony servers. And that sounds really fucking cool, but I don't think it's going to work that well. And it's also something that they said, it's this is not going to be there day one. They were very explicitly saying, this is something we are looking at for the future. It is sort of where we want to be able to take this service. But
I think this is the sort of thing. This is my theory. I think Sean and I, you and I have been talking a lot about how the weird thing about gaming in relation to, let's say, movies or music is that it's tough to archive.
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot because it's such an interesting problem with games.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great, PS2 games out there, Xbox games out there, PS3, Xbox 360 games that are just by the natural flow of time going to not be able to be easily played.
Yeah, how, there are a lot of, really obscure consoles, Commodore 64 games. Those are, hard to find. Luckily, those really primitive games you can emulate easier, but as technology gets more and more complex, it's going to be harder and harder for, just fans to be able to create emulation software on a PC.
Yeah. And so we don't want these games to be lost, though. But there's sort of this other dual thing, is that if you're going to make legitimately next-generation technology, if you want to move technology forward, you have to leave that stuff behind at a certain point.
Yeah, because with the PS3, you can't stick a fucking Emotion Engine chip and a cell processor into the PS4. That thing would cost way too much.
Right. It would be really, really cost prohibitive and probably wouldn't run very well.
Yeah.
Or smoothly. So that's the problem there, and maybe the streaming service, and I don't even think in the next 5 years it will be the full solution, but maybe by the time the PS5 rolls around, that is how we do backwards compatibility, and maybe that will be sort of the ultimate dream of everything works, and we can just do it streaming, and because, by the time the PS5 is ready, there will be, internet will be really, that will be the way of the world. That will be something that is everywhere. And for now, over the lifetime of the PS4, it's going to be spottier. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And if you were streaming a game, I would probably plug it in via Ethernet to make sure that works well.
Yeah, for sure.
But, I'm glad that they're working on this, because that means it's a future-proofing kind of thing, which is that why not start on it now? And if for the PS4 it's imperfect, well, maybe when we make another console 5, 6, 7 years down the road, maybe then it works really well then. That's always good, to try to start something as early as you can, because if you don't, you kind of get lost when you really need it.
Yeah, and sort of but what is really the tricky thing with this, and the reason why I don't think it will work, has nothing to do with I don't believe in the Gaikai technology, or that on the Sony side they don't have it down. The problem is that the United States internet infrastructure is not in a place where, there are some people, if you have a really good internet and you are really close to wherever, some sort of Sony server site, then it's going to work really fucking well for you. And luckily, if it's Sony doing it, I imagine it's going to be a lot better than what OnLive was doing, because the technology is more advanced, and then also, Sony has way more resources to, make that work a lot better. But if your internet's not that great, if your ISP is throttling your bandwidth and you only have a limited amount of bandwidth a month, that's going to be an issue. You can't just be streaming games constantly, and that's where a lot of that stuff sort of falls apart in my mind. Is that the infrastructure is not in place to accommodate that yet.
And that's basically my view on it too. I just the infrastructure will be there one day.
Yeah, hopefully someday in the future, internet will be like telephone lines were. It's just every house has one. It's completely expected. It's just the infrastructure works because everybody has to have one.
Yeah.
So hopefully, relatively soon. It seems like we should be at that point already, but hopefully relatively soon. Hopefully the government will get on that or something. I know big government's kind of thing, but at some point...
But that's the point. That is a very fundamental purpose of government.
At some point, everyone should just kind of have internet. Or else, if you want the internet to be more capable, at some point, having it be that limited is what's really holding back our ability to expand what the internet can do.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
hopefully that Gaikai stuff will work out in the future better when that infrastructure comes in place. But then also, you should say, it is something that is going to work really well for specific people. If you have really good internet service, it's going to work a lot better for you, and if you live in certain locations, it's going to work really well for you. But, if you're some dude who has, really shitty internet and is in Australia, you might be fucked. Yeah. It's just that kind of thing that it'll be unfortunate for a lot of people, but it will be really cool for the people it does work with, and then hopefully sometime in the future it will work for everybody.
Yeah, and again, I think the effort is neat. I think it's neat that they brought it out and said something about it, even though they really don't have it all figured out yet.
Yeah.
Because it cushions the blow a little bit of the backwards compatibility compatibility stuff, just to know that they're trying to figure out ways to still bring it to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I do completely understand why they had to take backwards compatibility out this time.
Yeah,
particularly
for the PS3 stuff.
Yes,
that I wasn't particularly expecting it would be there. I was really hoping it would, but
yeah. And I mean, I hope more for other people. Like for me, this is not a major thing that's going to hold me back from buying a PS4 because I don't own a lot of PS3 stuff.
Yeah.
So
I don't own any PS3 stuff.
Right. So it's not. I'm okay starting fresh. If the next Xbox comes out and they have no backwards compatibility,
that would be really frustrating for us specifically because we have like a wall of Xbox games back there.
Yeah. So we know the feeling. Like if you're a PS3 gamer and you love your PS3 and now you realize I'm going to have to keep this thing around with my PS4.
Yeah. Your living room is going to be a little cluttered during the transition period until you get to a point where you don't want to play a lot of PS3 games or they figure out backwards compatibility.
Yeah. That's too bad. But,
But it's not, I don't think anywhere it's really a deal breaker for anybody.
That's what happens when you have an 8-year-long console cycle.
Yeah, at some point, some stuff just has to be lost at a certain point.
Yeah.
But then I should say, the thing that is more encouraging about the streaming stuff, and I think that will work well for its purpose, it's not going to be like, the best thing in the world, but it'll do what it needs to do, is they did talk, again, never went into specifics. This was the most frustrating part of the whole conference was the Gaikai stuff, because it was stuff that was really interesting, but is clearly not quite done yet, and they just didn't want to go into it too much to make promises that they didn't know they couldn't keep. But props to them for not making those promises that they definitely knew they couldn't keep. Like any one that they did make, we had a lot of caveats on it. It's like it's not necessarily going to be there. Unlike like the PS3 conference, which was like there will be dual monitor support. There will be 2 HDMI ports on there. I saw 3 Ethernet ports. I saw that. I was like, no, there is not. You fucking idiots! It's PS2 fucking backwards compatibility for 6 months. So at least they didn't. Hopefully they didn't do that. Maybe like the Killzone Watch Dogs will never come out. You have no idea. But they did say with the Gaikai streaming services that you will be able to demo games using that. Maybe not like day one, but at some point that seems to be like one of the key features is like having that stream to you and just being able to straight off the PSN market just go in and say hey, Journey looks really fucking awesome, or like Journey 2 or whatever. I want to try this for like 5 minutes. I don't necessarily want to like throw down $15 on this game I know almost nothing about. And so it's like you can just demo it, play for, again, didn't go into specifics, but play for however long they let you play for free. And then, if you really like it, then you can buy it. And then alternatively, you could also, just watch someone live streaming it or just like go to YouTube and see all the videos that people can just pull off their PS4 and stuff like that. So that's really nice, just having the idea of it's going to make stuff like recently the Aliens Colonial Marines game came out and there was a huge debacle because when they demoed that game at E3 and stuff like that, it was clearly a far superior version of the game than actually what came out, and a lot of people, are sort of after Gearbox in, Randy Pitchford's head because they were promised a game that they did not get.
They lied.
Yeah, they basically lied. If you look at those demos, it is extreme. And so we're sort of coming right off of that, like that was like a week or 2 weeks before this PS4 conference. Coming right off of that, the idea of being able to demo any game and being able to watch a game being played live just straight off the console is really nice. Because it's going to help a lot of people who doesn't necessarily, want to keep on going to the internet or don't have like a bunch of gaming sites that they check a lot, which is the vast majority of people who are in this market, will be able to make much more informed decisions very easily straight off of the console without having to get off the couch and like put a lot of effort into it because, they don't want to do that. They're not like this gaming enthusiast.
And it will, by extension, hold developers to maybe a higher standard.
Yeah, hopefully. You will not be able to fucking, bullshit us like that again.
Yeah.
I really pull the wool over our eyes this time, Randy Pitchford.
Yeah. And I really like this idea, too, because I think I like playing demos before I buy a game, but sometimes it's a little tough because they're big downloads. You have to wait a while, get into it. And it can be a bit of a hassle.
Yeah.
And not all games have them. So having this maybe demos over streaming, good idea.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the sort of thing that it's like, it's a smaller chunk of the game, and knowing that it's a demo and you're like not paying any money for it and stuff like that, having controller latency and issues like that is not going to be a big deal. If you just want to check out a little bit of the game, see what it's kind of like, and have like a general idea, you're not going to have like the controller precision that you would when you actually download it and play it off the system. But just having that nice free demo for everything, which is basically what they said they're going to do, which would make sense if you're streaming stuff, you can just do it for anything. That'll be amazing. I think that'll be a really key feature.
I agree. I mean, it's a cool idea. PlayStation Plus has this really interesting demo feature where there are certain games where you can just download the game to your hard drive, play it for an hour, and it's an unlimited demo for an hour.
Yeah.
And that's a cool idea, I think. And, now, instead of having to download the whole fucking game, you could just stream it for an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
then that's... Then, I think that's basically the extent of what they talked about with streaming, so I think let's use this to transition into sort of just the other extra little features that they threw in onto the PS4. So we talked about the share button. I think, this is one of the coolest things that I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, but they have the second chip in there. That's there specifically to handle downloads, which is fucking awesome, because basically the coolest feature of this that they talked about was that you will be able to download a game and play it at the same time, because that extra chip will be handling the download, and the main CPU and GPU will be completely dedicated to actually playing the game. And so that's fucking awesome.
That's amazing. I mean, let me give you some examples here. So PlayStation Plus, you get all these free games, right?
Yeah.
So I've been downloading a lot of them because they had Super Street Fighter 4. I love Street Fighter 4. That's awesome. Let's get it on the system.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 is great. I want it to be even more super.
But it's 17 fucking gigabytes. So I have to, it's if I want to download it, I'm going to have to wait a day before I can play this. With the PS4, there's going to be even bigger file sizes, obviously.
Yeah.
I would expect every game coming out of it will be using dual-layer Blu-ray discs. Mm-hmm. But if you can just start playing it once it's downloaded a little, that solves that problem.
Yeah, that's something that's really cool that Blizzard has been doing a little bit on their services online, which is, it's a different thing. It's it's not like your computer has a second chip and it dedicated downloads or anything like that. But they did manage a system where, if you only have to download 5% of World of Warcraft or something, and if you're doing the trial version, and then it'll just download the rest while you're in the starter area.
Yeah.
There's some of that is sort of being explored in different ways on the PC market, but specifically this is something that I hope Steam does. I hope this feature becomes something that's
standard.
Yeah, that's standard, because particularly they have confirmed basically that every single PlayStation 4 title is going to be available digitally. Almost damn sure it's going to be available digitally day one at launch. And because that's just the direction the market is moving in. Not to say that we're going to get rid of discs. I don't want us to get rid of discs. Physical media has its place. I like having discs. I like having, for games I really like, I like having the physical thing. I like, having it on my shelf. I like that. I don't want that to go away. But a lot of just the other titles, if I don't want to go to the store or something, or go order it off of Amazon, or if there's a really nice sale of it digitally, I want to download it digitally. And if you're doing that for way more titles than you were in the past on the consoles, having that be much more robust and easier to do is going to be really nice, because that's one of the most frustrating things about Steam is that, we have a good internet connection, but not a fantastic one. So if I'm downloading a brand new game on Steam, it's going to take a pretty long time for it to download, and while it's downloading, I don't want to do anything else on the internet because that's going to slow down the download, that kind of stuff, and that's sort of really frustrating. And having that, just being able to download in the background past a certain point, and me just being able to play it while it downloads the rest of the game, that's one of the things I'm most excited about. That's just, it's relatively a small thing, but it just sounds so goddamn convenient, and that's... that is something that we humans love, is just convenience. And it seems like that is one thing that they're really putting a lot of effort into with the PS4. It's just making it easier for you to use.
Yes.
Then, also, the second chip is going to be able to handle where you will be able to download games while the system is effectively running off of just the RAM. And so, that's awesome. You're not going to have to, I remember the Xbox 360 obviously has a similar kind of thing. It's not the same because it's not completely off, but it goes into a relatively low power mode if you have put background downloads thing on or whatever. But Xbox 360, even the newer models, are still pretty fucking loud because the fans are spinning. So even when you're doing that, those fans are spinning while it's downloading that fucking demo or whatever you have downloading in the background. And that's pretty annoying. So it's not this big deal, but just having that, being able to go into a near off mode, just running off of really low power and downloading in the background, that sounds awesome.
And we're only scratching the surface of some of these cool, just sort of convenient features. One of my other ones that I'm really excited for is you can basically just suspend a game in sleep mode, go do other shit, start another game if you want, and then come back to it. Download stuff while you're playing a game, a separate game. So you go in and you play a Killzone game, and you're at the same time you're downloading the new Resistance game, and you can do that all at the same time. This is stuff that the PlayStation Vita can do all of that, and I love it. It's been
it's one of the coolest things about playing on the PlayStation Vita is that if you just want to put it down for 5 minutes, it's like an iPhone, you just you hit the fucking power button once, it just goes into a sleep mode, you put it down, you go do whatever you're doing, you pick it back up, you hit the power button, and it's it brings you right back to where you were in the game. That's particularly, this is something, again, that like Mark Cerny did a really good job of presenting, is that you kind of forget that nowadays it takes like a good 3 to 5 minutes if you're booting up your PS3 or 360 to like get it to come up, like get it to go into the OS, or navigate the OS to get to your game, to have the game load into the start screen, then load your file and get into the game. It's like
it takes way too long.
Yeah, it's something that you've kind of gotten used to at this point, but you forget, back when games were just loaded off of cartridges, which, like they were far inferior games, they're a lot less technologically impressive, but if I wanted to play an N64 game right now, I would have to go find my N64, but I could find my N64, grab my trusty old Ocarina of Time card, slap into the top of that bitch, just turn it on, and I'm reloaded right into the main menu, load the game, it goes in, like 30 seconds time, I'm playing my file of Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
So having that functionality of basically bringing that iPhone style or Vita style sleep mode effectively to a console where if you want to stop playing the game for a little bit, you just hit the power button once, it goes into sleep mode, and you can just, just leave it like that. It's not something where you have to keep on turning the console off. That sleep mode thing is just like expected when you're not using the console. You put it into sleep mode. You don't turn it off.
Yeah.
And you can just bring it right back into your game. So you're not have to constantly like saving and loading files and having to go through all that process. And that's so much cooler.
That's so much. I mean, this is why the Vita is kind of my favorite console right now because it's just so modern in how it handles all this stuff. It's so user-friendly.
Yeah, it's post-iPhone. I feels like the iPhone has a lot of those little features like that when they happened on the iPhone, you didn't necessarily like think about how they could apply to like other devices like a gaming console because it makes so much sense for how the iPhone works. But now that they're sort of taking those ideas and being like, this like low power mode thing and not having to like boot up devices like that, even though the iPhone is running complex software, that's really cool. That is really useful. You just have the fucking device on all the time. The device is never off. Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, I'm running a pretty older iPhone. I'm 2-3 generations back on the iPhone now, but the Vita runs all that stuff even smoother than the iPhone does.
Yeah. It's really cool. Those are some of like the handful of things that, again, like on the face of it, don't sound like this is like this is how all games are. Like this is the world-changing, shattering event. Once you go there, you can never come back. But weirdly, these things are kind of more, once you have these, you're never going to want to have a console that does not have these. Because they are little convenience things, and once you have the little convenience, you don't want it to go away.
Yeah, well this is crazy, but even the fact that the PS3 runs its startup stuff slightly faster than the 360...
me too. It makes me slightly more inclined to boot up the PS3 than the 360. It's like a little thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is just, it's crazy that these little features, it's like, I want to spend my $400 just to have them.
Yeah, just to have this, because it's also, then, because once you start talking about that, once Mark Cerny went through all that process of, all the stuff that the console does before you start playing a game, and I, had to think about that again, because the 360 has been my primary console for, 8 fucking years now. I haven't thought about that process in so long, because it's just sort of standard, expected. Then I started thinking about, how much of my life have I spent just loading up my Xbox 360, loading into the game, and then loading my save file?
Well, and you know what? This is something
probably a really depressing amount that I don't want to know.
And this is something that seriously I've been cognizant of with the Xbox since they got at least the most recent firmware. I'm just aware it's fucking slow and clunky and really tough to get into anything.
Yeah.
And any menu you want to load your apps menu, you've got to wait 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And it's and I've been kind of that's to me been one of the most obvious reasons why we need next generation hardware. It's just
they are retrofitting so much onto the old hardware because those consoles came at a really good time to transfer into high definition, but a really shitty time to transfer into online stuff because they were right before the online scene changed.
Yeah. So I'm super excited for this stuff, and I hope the Xbox, the next one, has a lot of this kind of stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
So what else have we got here?
Let's see. I've got again they have all the expected Netflix services. It will function with the Move, but I think that's sort of the standard. We went through the specs, we went through the controller, the features. Let's talk about. They did mention the PS Vita a little bit at the very beginning of the conference. They said they will have more announcements at the Vita in the future. That this conference was not about the Vita; it's all about the PlayStation 4. But there is stuff they're going to do stuff with the Vita probably at E3. So.
But they did have one really cool.
Yeah, they did have one really cool little thing, which is the remote play feature that exists in the PS Vita with the PS3, but is...
Why don't I explain it?
Okay, yeah, because you've actually used it. I haven't used it yet.
I think a lot of people might not know what it is.
Yeah.
So the remote play feature is that on your Vita, You go into your Remote Play app, basically. You also have... It's not an app you have to download on your PS3. It's just in the settings.
Yeah.
And you sort of link your Vita and your PS3, get to know each other, and then you can go to Remote Play, and what it'll do is it'll just stream your PS3 to your PS Vita, and it's pretty flawless. It's because they're both 16:9 screens. Yeah. It comes down to the Vita. You can just control everything on your Vita. Sound comes through everything, and you can use your apps. You can search the store. You can play games. The only thing you really can't do is watch Blu-ray movies, I think, or play PS3 full games. But you can play all your PSN titles, your PS1 titles, those sorts of things. You can even use it as a remote controller on some games. And then the Vita was actually very specifically designed with this in mind because it's missing two critical sets of buttons that the PS3 controller uses, which is R2, which are the triggers, and R3, which are the thumbstick push-ins.
Yeah, pushing in the thumbsticks.
So what they've done to replace that is they just have the back touchpad you can use for those, or you can use the front touchscreen, and you can customize it all.
Similar to how they adapted the Call of Duty controls to Declassified.
Yes, very similar.
One of the few smart things they did with that, the only smart thing they did with that game.
Yeah.
Other than the sprinting thing.
Yes. So anyway, with the PlayStation 4, they're basically taking the natural next step, which is that it'll do all that shit too, but it will also stream every PS4 game day one to your PS Vita wirelessly. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we should say that after the fact, the president of Sony Computer Entertainment, Shuhei Yoshida, did say that some games are obviously not going to work, and ones that use the Move features a lot. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do that. And they didn't necessarily 100% confirm that it will be every single PlayStation 4 game, like, right out of the box.
They say they're trying, though.
It's like, they say that they're going to try their damnedest. Like, it sounded like the quote was, he's really trying hard. That he really, I think he specifically said that if that wasn't in there, it would break his heart. Yeah. Like, it's something that they're really dedicated to doing, and it shows, and they just talked a lot about, at that section, integrating the PS Vita and the PS4 together, to making them part of the same ecosystem, similar to what they're doing with. They talked a lot about having apps on like iPhones, tablet devices, that kind of thing, just like to have so that you're never sort of away from the experience and you have some sort of interaction with your games or the game community if you so desire to have it. And obviously the Vita would be able to be much more fully integrated into that because it is like a tiny fucking PS3 in your hands, more or less.
And I really want to focus on this a little bit because I think it's really cool because, Nintendo has been trying for years to do cool integration with its handheld systems. I should say trying. They tried with the Game Boy Advance. They really never did it again.
Yeah, there's Pokemon Stadium. You could put your Pokemon into Pokemon Stadium or play Pokemon Red or Blue on your TV
and that was
using
cool.
a little dongle on the bottom of the 64 controller.
Right, and then
which was cool. Yeah.
And then on the Game Boy Advance with the GameCube, you had like special connection cords. It would work with some games. Final Fantasy.
There's like that.
Crystal Chronicles was the name.
Like in Four Swords, the Legend of Zelda like multiplayer Legend of Zelda.
It was pretty clunky, but it was cool for the time, obviously.
Yeah, because nothing else was like that.
And I think that's something I've always kind of wanted. I like portable gaming at its best.
Yeah.
But I think one of the cool ideas that's never been fully integrated is make it another part of your main console experience, because these portable systems, you buy them from the same people who make your console. Mm-hmm. And so let's say you're dedicated to both of them and they can really interact. That makes both of those systems better. Yeah. And I think they're really dedicated to doing that with the Vita, and this is one step of it that sounds really neat. And I think they've got some other ideas in store that we haven't seen yet.
And I think one thing that would be interesting, I don't know how well they'll be able to do it, but because like when you're streaming the PS4 game to the Vita, the PS4 serves as a server and the Vita is a client. It'd be really interesting to see that go the other way. If I could, play Persona 4 the Golden on my TV just using my Vita, that would be really cool.
I would love that.
Feasible that would be. It seems like that because that technology is obviously not really built into the Vita right now. But maybe there's but if it's receiving the signals and it's sending out signals, they can probably rejigger it and do something similar using software patches. Like, not saying they're going to do it, but that would be something really cool. Another feature to sort of have that road go both ways.
Yeah, and just as simply as having all these apps they're talking about having them on your Vita too, and really just, then your PlayStation experience is kind of total. You have it with you everywhere.
Yeah, in any form that you want it to have. Obviously if you're away from the console, the further away you get from the console, the more limited your interaction is going to be. But just having any of that interaction, if you want to have it, it sounds really cool. And it's definitely sort of like the new wave of technology is having that sort of interface with you at all times. Again, it's sort of like the iPhone revolution of you just have this device on you and it can do so much. Integrating that with how consoles are now, that is exactly how things need to be.
Yeah,
and having this existing piece of hardware, having the Vita, which has been out for a year now, have this whole new functionality when they bring out their new console is really promising. Just knowing that they're looking to really integrate this ecosystem. And one of the cool things is that with this remote play stuff, they did show it at the conference. They showed Mark Cerny's game Knack playing on a PS Vita. So it's like we know that the technology does actually work. It's not like the Gaikai stuff where they just talked about it. They did show that it can work.
Yeah.
So
and they were literally filming the Vita. They didn't have it like plugged in or anything.
Yeah, no, they were. That's like the. It's just kind of funny because it reminded me, like a week or 2 weeks before the PS4 announcement, there was a small Vita thing for Japan specifically that I watched. It was interesting because I don't know that much Japanese and trying to figure that out. It was just funny because all of it was they were just filming a dude holding a Vita.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really hard to capture video off of a Vita because it doesn't have an HDMI port. But
right. But anyway, I definitely, as a Vita owner, it's something that when I make my pro and cons list of what console do I want to buy, what gives me the most, that's going to be a big entry in the pro list because I own a Vita.
If you already own a Vita, it's like they're adding a lot more value to that purchase after the fact, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah, this is obviously the clear comparison here is the Wii U. It's going to work the same way as the Wii U gamepad.
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah, but the thing is, then you don't just put your gamepad down after its battery life runs out after an hour.
Yeah.
And go do something else. You can take your Vita with you and then go do other stuff with it.
It would be more like think of how fucking awesome this would be if on the Wii U the 3DS was the gamepad.
Right.
It is that you now have these two devices that apart function perfectly well. If you just have I just have a Vita, you have the PS3 up here, but I don't own a PS3. The PlayStation Vita is the first PlayStation device I have actually owned, even though I've played extensively on all of them. And I just have that, and I'm totally satisfied with that purchase. If I just have that, that'd be fine. If I just had didn't have that and just had the PS4 when it came out, that would be totally fine too. It's not like there's anything missing. But now if you have both of them together, you can bring them together and they both bring extra functionality to each other. So you have two already satisfying purchases that then inform each other and improve each other in a way that the Wii U doesn't really do because they have to just use that game tablet for everything on the Wii U because that's what its big thing is.
Yeah, and that's something that really disappointed me about the DS era is that there was no functionality whatsoever between the Nintendo DS and the Wii, and there's no functionality whatsoever, and there never will be between the 3DS and the Wii U.
Yeah, because there's no infrastructure for that to be possible.
Yeah, so they just exist separately, and there's no synergy.
Yeah. Nice business words there.
Yeah.
Synergy.
I'm actually thinking of Final Fantasy XIII. Synergist is one of the paradigms.
Okay, sure.
Just kidding. Anyway, let's go.
And then you should say something that I just found notable. Again, kind of going back to the Japan-focused conference about the Vita, is that when that happened, they did announce a price drop in Japan. And it was really funny. I just want to talk about that conference for a little bit. Is that... before it happened at 1 in the morning over here because obviously it was in Japan. And before it happened, all the fucking big gaming sites were okay, Sony's having a Vita press conference. There are going to be new Vita announcements. This is going to be really interesting. And they all clearly were going to want to cover it. And then I was oh, that's kind of cool. And then I started watching it, and I very quickly realized this is a Japan announcement. Those were all Japanese games. I don't expect half of them to ever come over here. Kind of thing. And it was really interesting for me because I like that I'm getting more and more into sort of the Japanese gaming market again with sort of the Persona games and stuff like that. I'm getting more into anime and stuff like that. So it was really interesting from my perspective just kind of watch it and see some of that stuff. And I came out of it, I was that was really cool. They announced some cool games. Half of them were Monster Hunter ripoffs, but whatever. That's kind of cool. There's a price drop. And they dropped the price to basically what it is over here only in yen because it was slightly more expensive because of the exchange rates. But then after I came out of that, the next day I was I wonder what all the news sites are going to talk about it. Fucking nothing. None of the games were mentioned. I never saw a single... And 4 or 5 games were announced that were never heard of. There was an Atlas title, Dragon's Crown, that looked the most interesting one that will probably come over here. No mention of that. Not at all. I could not find a single fucking one other than on the Vita subreddit. And that was it. And that was one link, and that was a comment under just the thread about that announcement.
The only thing that was publicized over here was Final Fantasy X HD, which we already knew about.
Basically knew about.
And it was not even really a full game announcement. They just showed character models.
But the other thing that was published over here was that there was going to be a price drop in Japan, and that made everybody sort of sit up and think there will be a price drop for the Vita over here as well. And so I just want to mention that's not going to happen. The reason why the price drop is in Japan is, one, Japan is the primary handheld gaming market because it is. If you don't know a lot about the gaming market in Japan, that is what it is. It is huge. Handheld is the big thing over there. That's PC gaming basically non-existent. The Xbox basically non-existent. Consoles Like the PlayStation and the Wii and Nintendo stuff does okay, but the big sellers were the PSP and now the 3DS, and the Vita wants to get back that handheld pie.
And it's doing okay over there.
Yeah, it's not doing, Persona 4 The Golden came out, that was a huge boost to their sales over there. But again, the Vita was more expensive in Japan originally, so I think it's like the equivalent of maybe like $215 for the lesser SKU over there now. It's just like not that big of a price drop in actuality, so it's not something like to make a big deal out of, I guess, but there are some people making a big deal out of it, so I felt I should mention it.
And I think I also want to mention, because I think it's worth noting because we both own Vitas and played them, that is a $250 piece of equipment.
Yeah,
I have no complaints whatsoever about the price point for that piece of hardware. It is completely worth it.
Yeah, I completely agree. The only thing, the memory cards are way more expensive. But
that's shitty. They need to make those, either open them up to other people making them or drop those prices. That is ridiculous. They really should come bundled with like 16 gigs of memory because you really can't use it without that. That's stupid. The price point of the system itself, if you play a Vita for 5 minutes, like go to a GameStop and watch do a demo thing with it, you'll be amazed. It's like nothing else you've ever seen handheld. So, yeah.
Big surprise, we're really enjoying our Vitas. But so that was basically the extent of what they talked about the Vita at the conference. So now let's move into sort of like, all that stuff was sort of like the first half, and I think the second half we'll breeze through a lot of it, because not a lot of it doesn't necessarily need a lot of discussion. But this is sort of the section where they brought out a lot of developers and they showed off a lot of games, way more than I was expecting.
Well, we didn't,
and properly showed off games. Like they were not. Some of them were just trailers, but they were not all trailers. Like when I watched the 2005 press conference, they showed quite a few games. Half of them never came out. That was like a really interesting thing. Like half of them, like there's a Mobile Suit Gundam game that as soon as I saw that trailer, I was like, holy shit! They were going to make a Mobile Suit Gundam game for the PS3. That never happened. So there were a lot of trailers that came out at that conference, and half the games never came out. Almost all the trailers are complete bullshit. But so compared to that, this is a lot of actual live game demos, seeing live footage, and they showed like 9 different games, and that's awesome. Way more than I was expecting.
Oh yeah,
like the whole that's sort of the story of the conference. Way more than I was expecting. Like coming out of that, I was insanely impressed. So I guess let's just go down the list of the games and talk about them a little bit. First of all, I've mentioned it a few times here, is the game Knack by Japan Studio, and the lead developer is Mark Cerny, the lead architect on the PlayStation 4. And this is kind of interesting because it's the first title they showed. And I think it was an interesting choice as the first title they showed. I think it was mostly because Mark Cerny made it, and he has not been really deep into game development. I want to say, based on just looking at his credits, probably since about the last Spyro the Dragon title that Sony made. And so he has not been deep into the game development for a long time. But if you look at his list of games, he makes character-based action games. He was on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, he was on Crash Bandicoot, he was on Spyro the Dragon. Those are the kind of games he's interested in. And Knack, the trailer they showed and the little footage of him playing it on the Vita definitely evoked that feel of a PlayStation 1 era character action game, fucking Crash Bandicoot style, but way more interesting. The sort of the premise is, it seems like there's a sort of artificial life form called Knack that's made. It has almost a sort of Katamari Damacy thing going on, where he can there's all these little bits, and he can sort of make himself bigger or smaller by absorbing or rejecting them. And so they didn't, there weren't a lot of specifics of what the gameplay was going to be like. But I don't think this is necessarily a title that shows off particularly well how impressive the PS4 would be. Technically, it's not visually marvelous. I think probably a lot of the more interesting part was all the physics simulations of the little knickknacks in Knack that I imagine is probably pretty difficult to do and may have been not possible on previous console generations. But it was an interesting showing. Yeah. It made me feel really nostalgic, because I remember the PlayStation 1 game I played the most with my friends was Crash Bandicoot 1 and 2, and I really, really liked those games. They're sort of some of my favorite platformers before I started kind of moving away from playing the platformer genre. So kind of a nice nostalgia trip, but not necessarily something that shows off the hardware that much. But, Mark Cerny made it.
A good game is a good game. And if it's
exactly. And if it's made by Mark Cerny, it's probably going to be a good game. And, and there are a lot of people, there's a pretty dedicated audience that really likes these kinds of games, these platformers. The Rayman Origins game that came out a year or two ago didn't sell spectacularly well, sold well enough to make a sequel. But the people who got it really fucking love that game, and I think There's a lot of nostalgia around this era of 3D platformers, and I think anybody who's really into Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, or the original Jak and Daxter, I would say look to this game. It's definitely going to be your cup of tea.
Well, this is what I was going to say, is that I do like platformers. They're not sort of my main thing I play, but I like having them sort of just in my gaming diet.
Yeah.
And I like that the PS4 conference they showed that they have a lot of different kinds of games coming out.
Yeah, definitely.
That was sort of what this part of the conference was about, and NAC was a good way to show that. It's like Nintendo does not have the exclusive rights to platformers. There are other, we can put these out too.
I mean, back in the day, really in the PlayStation 1 and 2 era, Sony was the dominant. That was their bread and butter. They had Jak and Daxter, they had Ratchet and Clank, they had Sly Cooper. Before that, they had Spyro, and they had Crash Bandicoot. It's fucking, Nintendo had Mario. That was it. They had one Mario title that would come out every 5 years.
Yeah, so I like this idea, and I like that if I buy a PS4, I'll know I can get more kinds of games than I probably could on an Xbox, which is mainly shooters.
Yeah. And then also, I think it was smart to have NAC be the title that you showed playing on the PS Vita, because it also definitely seems like the kind of game that if I was to use remote play, I would use it to play a game like NAC, or a game like Persona, or some other JRPG that doesn't need a lot of really precise control or manipulation of two analog sticks at the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. NAC looks really interesting. But then, sort of the biggest demo they showed, it was an 8-minute video. So this was the one where at the end they they kicked it out to Facebook Live. And that was really fascinating. But it's sort of something that not that surprising. There's going to be a Killzone game on the PS4. But interestingly enough, it is not Killzone 4. They are calling it Killzone Shadowfall. I should say I've never played any of the Killzone games. I've never been that interested in playing them. It's just not a franchise I'm that interested in. My real first-person shooter interest stops at a lot of Valve games and Halo. That's sort of where I go for those types of games. But lots of people really like Killzone. I'm not saying they're bad games or anything. I've just never been interested in them. But obviously I've seen a lot of the trailers. That's usually sort of Sony's technical showcase for their machines is when a new Killzone thing comes out. Killzone 2 was their big. Yes, the PS3 can be really powerful. People know how to make games for it. That was what Killzone 2 was for them, 2008 or 9. And so this was really interesting because it seems like it not being Killzone 4 is a very deliberate choice. It seems like coming from the outside, it looks very different. It's a lot more bright and vibrant. It looks all the Killzone stuff takes place on other planets. They're humans, but they've gone to other planets and shit. And so it is future-based. But they've always used, in every Killzone trailer, you see the dude has, the assault rifle with, the double, magazine that's, taped together and a fucking, green sight on top. That is the Killzone gun. It's, their assault rifle. And this did not have that. It had, this sort of, particle rifle type thing. So it seems like it's taking place in the future. In that universe, it has a sort of, Cold War era thing going on from what they showed. And that seems really interesting. It seems like a smart choice to bring this franchise that everybody loves to the next generation. So it's your Sony guys get their Killzone game, but if you're someone like me who the PlayStation 4 is going to be the first home PlayStation Sony console I will most likely buy. I'm just still going to see what Microsoft does, but I'm definitely looking at PlayStation right now. That I will still be able to play this game if I so choose, and not have to be mired by having played Killzone 1, 2, and 3.
Well, that was the tone of several of these ongoing franchises, which I think is really smart, especially because it's not a backwards compatible system.
Yeah.
And just having this idea of a fresh start is the right way to go.
Yeah, a fresh start, but still leveraging your already existing IPs that are extremely popular, so that Sony guys can get into it. And I should say, the Shadowfall demo did impress me. I think visually it was really interesting looking, but it didn't. There's nothing it looked like a Killzone game ultimately to me, in terms of gameplay. So I'm still not really, really interested in playing it. If I do get a PS4, I might pick it up. I'll look at reviews and see if people really love it or whatever. But it did not sort of stress to me what the technology can do in terms of enhancing gameplay. I think the most impressive stuff was the view distance was extreme. The view distance, they've had this whole sequence where the guy jumps off this balcony, he's trying to get to this helicopter, grabs this rope hanging off the helicopter, and is dragged across the city, and you can just see the city in full detail as far as the eye can see. That was really cool. That was the most technically impressive thing about the demo. And then I think it was a really smart thing to sort of cap it off with, right after they talked about the share button shit, to then, after the demo ends, hit that share button, take that video, and kick it up to Facebook, and then have the guy come out and say, by the way, that Killzone thing that uploaded to Facebook, you can check it right now. As soon as he said that, I was like, okay, and checked it. It was right there on the Killzone Facebook page. So I think that was the most interesting part of the whole demo. Was just that was a really clever thing to do.
Right, and more importantly than anything else, this shows that they have great first-party support, and they have games that their fan base is passionate about that they will not be able to get anywhere else.
Yeah, that is one of the things that Sony has always had over Microsoft, is that they started in the PlayStation 1 days and carried through a dedicated team of like 4 to 6 really, really good first-party developers, and 2 of them showed off here. This is Guerrilla Games, who makes the other Killzone games. They're one of the key, Sony developers. Then moving on, the next game that was showed is a game by Evolution Studios. I showed you the video of the guy presenting it. It's a game called Drive Club, which is all about team-based racing.
Really, really enthusiastic team-based racing.
Yeah.
Because the developer who came out to talk about Drive Club, he loves cars.
He is the dude. Everybody knows this guy who's the guy who is really into cars, and most of the time, he's totally fucking normal. And then, when a Ferrari drives past you on the highway or something, you're like, oh, shit. Yeah. And then he does not shut the fuck up about cars, and he's goes into, the details, like the engine. It's just everything about the car. And, I am not a car guy. I don't own a car. I haven't driven a car in 2 years. I am as little of a car guy as you could possibly be. So not being a car guy and watch this dude talk about cars, I got really fucking excited about cars. The only racing game I have ever liked, the only racing game I will ever play unless Criterion ever makes a sequel, is Burnout Paradise. That is my racing game. I still play Burnout Paradise today. I will probably never leave Burnout Paradise. It is my racing game. But seeing this dude talk about Drive Club and his dream of team-based racing, they've had that idea kicking around Evolution Studios for 10 years. They registered the name Drive Club 9 years ago. You can check it online. I love this fucking dude.
Yeah.
He's great.
Sean is quoting him now, by the way.
That is what he said at the beginning of the
presentation. The first thing I want to say is, he was super eloquent. He got his
I'm not trying to make fun of the dude or anything. He seemed like a really smart, really knowledgeable dude. He had this British accent. Fucking great.
But this is what I'm saying, is there's this interesting contrast. Usually when someone is this excited about their product, they're not equally eloquent about it, know? But he was very excited, loved the cars they were showing off, loved the graphics, and you could tell he had an enthusiasm for finally having the technology to bring his car vision to life.
Yeah, he's been wanting... I almost got the sense that this dude made the game himself. That's what it felt like. That Evolution Studios is just this guy. And it's this guy has literally been making this game for 10 years, just modeling cars.
Yeah.
He went, once he got into, he had this whole presentation sort of this was one of the few games that sort of talked about having the extra functionality with apps on the Vita and iPhones and stuff like that, being able to set up races and challenges with your friends and stuff like that. I still have this is the funniest thing about this whole thing, I have no fucking clue what team-based racing is. He just kept on saying team-based racing, and I got the idea that it's you have your friends, you can set up challenges, you can race with your friends, but team-based racing implies something almost like Mario Kart Double Dash, where it's you are racing and helping each other, and it's like a cooperative race. I have no idea what is that? Because, in a race, only one person can come first. There are no teams in races unless you're doing relay or something.
In NASCAR has teams. You're part of a team. You typically support. You pick the one-star racer who you're going to get over the finish line, and then other people.
Well, yeah, but only one dude races.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know. Most of what I know about NASCAR comes from the Ricky Bobby movie, and there's literal teams of racers in that.
Okay, well, I don't know anything about NASCAR, but this is not a NASCAR game.
It's not at all.
It's not like that kind of racing. It's it's like fucking Lamborghinis and shit like that.
Yeah, anyway, back to sort of the gameplay. It looks. I just want to say, all the stuff he was talking about, just jizzing over how great they could make the cars look and stuff, the visuals backed him up.
Yeah, no, this was technically, I think, the most... This is a weird thing. This has always been the case. Car games always show off the next-gen tech the best. I remember back when, the Xbox came out, I don't even remember what... for the PS3, it was the Gran Turismo game for PS3 that's that looks awesome. Those look like fucking cars. I know what cars look like, and it's I think it feels like cars are a lot simpler thing to sort of digitally recreate than something like a human that is, incredibly complex to recreate. digitally. The car is a thing that everybody knows what it looks like. If you got a cool looking car looks fucking cool, and you can make it digitally and make it look awesome.
That's really true. I mean, the best looking game still on the 3DS that I own is Ridge Racer 3D.
Ridge Racer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the best looking games I own on the Vita is Wipeout 2048, just because there's so much going on in every race in terms of visuals. So yeah, and I like a good racing game. I really do. Like, I don't play them a ton, but I would play them more, and I think this looks like a really fucking good game.
Yeah.
It makes me excited.
It's really interesting.
I was watching, Sean showed it to me, and I'm like, I want a fucking PS4 now, because I'm not a car guy either. Yeah. Like, I own a car, I like driving, but I'm probably never going to buy a car that costs more than like $3,000 in my life. I kind of like to skimp that way, because I don't need a fancy car. But in a game, fuck it, I'll have fancy cars. I'll do whatever.
It's like, I'll look how he like individually rendered every single fiber on the seat so that it can actually accurately reflect the light differently based on which way it is brushed. Like, I think my favorite part of the whole thing, this is something I always like have wanted, like my dream, like of like video games replicating how things work in the real world, just like digitally, is he talked about how the lights work, where it's like they actually, they have like the lenses, the reflectors, and the bulbs are rendered into the light to try to simulate the effect of like the rainbow shine you get when you wax the fucking headlights on the car. Like that, like he talked about all of that, rendering all of that just so that they could replicate that effect. Like that is the only reason he talked about that they even did that. But I just love that idea. I love that idea of like in a video game. It's almost like, looking into like the production details of like Lord of the Rings with all the that like made all this chainmail and all this history behind everything that when you watch the movie, 90% of that stuff you are never going to notice. I like the idea of that in a video game. That's like some dude went in there and fucking rendered the fucking light bulb in the light that you can't even see because it's covered up. Yeah. I like that someone like did that.
It's great. It's awesome.
And that dude had them do that because that dude fucking loves his goddamn cars.
Yep.
And they had the whole thing where it was like, it's not a cockpit view, it is real first-person racing. It's all like, probably there will be options other than first-person views if you don't like first-person racing. But likely, like the demo they showed was just like first-person, the dude like walking around the car, like went around the car, opened up the door, like sat down, buckled in his seatbelt that like, 4 latches in it.
Yeah.
Very
precise.
Yeah, it is definitely... Like, it's not necessarily a game, again, I'm not a huge racing game guy, like, I think the game looks awesome, that I probably will not get this game, but no matter if you're not a racing game car guy or car guy, fucking, like, watch, like, go on YouTube and find the video of this dude giving this presentation, because you'll fall in love with, like, the car and the game, just because the guy is so enthusiastic and happy about it.
But, I mean, it does look like something where they could not have done it before.
Yeah,
super stylish racing game for people who are into that.
Yeah, if you're super into cars, this is definitely the game for you.
It's car porn. It's like,
exactly. It is car porn the game. That's exactly what it is. So let's move on to the next game. This is their other, like, really famous first-party developer, Sucker Punch Studios, made the Sly Cooper games in PS2 era, moved on to making the infamously making the Infamous series on PlayStation 3 that I dabbled in briefly, and I want to go back.
That's the same. I had sitting on my PlayStation 3 hard drive for literally years and never installed it.
Yeah, and I installed it for you and played like 5 minutes of it. We talked about that on the PS3 podcast. That is a franchise I do want to come back to that sometime. Yeah. I do want to play the Infamous games because they seem like the kind of game I'd be a lot more interested in. But they showed a brief trailer for Infamous Second Son, which is again sort of the same story of Killzone, where it's like it seems like it's part of the Infamous franchise, but the dude was not Cole, the guy from the Infamous games. He had fire powers instead of lightning powers, so it seems like it is an Infamous game that is sort of probably going to be mechanically similar to Infamous, but story-wise seems like it'll probably be a very good jumping-in point.
Yeah.
So I will probably still play the other Infamous games before this comes out. That's something I'm looking forward to doing like over the summer or something.
I have 2 on the PS3 now.
Oh, nice.
Because it was a free PlayStation Plus.
So yeah, but if you're someone, PS4, if you don't have access to the Infamous 1 or 2, this seems like something that like they're trying to do is have these new games be a jumping off point for the franchise. But the most interesting part of this whole thing was, again, this came right after the Drive Club thing. Like the Drive Club dude showed a little like trailer after that guy finished talking. He walked off stage,
got everyone pumped.
Yeah, got everyone's like super excited, like this really enthusiastic, really infectious demo of a game. And then this guy comes on, like, they don't say who he is, they don't say who the studio is. This guy just comes on, lights come up that, like, have, like, project this, like, gray background on the backdrop of the studio. Bald dude comes onto the stage and just says, in 1999, I was in a riot and was tear-gassed by the police. And that is the tone of his lead up to what you then eventually find out is Infamous Second Son. And this was the other video from the conference that I showed you before we started talking about before we started the podcast. So you want to talk about your experience seeing part of the conference, which is like the exact opposite of the Drive Club thing?
So this guy's basically, he comes out, he says those words, and you're like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, what?
And he's got this super serious expression on his face, and he's got this very expressive face, and it's very just downtrodden and disturbed, and he starts talking like he's a soldier suffering from PTSD.
Yeah.
And he's explaining how, the government watches us. In England, there are 1.4 million cameras or something like that. Or
looking at you at all times.
There's one camera for every 14 people in the United Kingdom. In the United States, 1 in 4 people has been wiretapped. And he's talking about all this government chooses, and he's like, we are safe, but at the cost of our freedom.
And that was the best part, is after he says that, there's this really slow zoom in on his face, and he just says nothing for 30 seconds, just his expression. He just sounds like he's about to go into tears.
Yeah, and it looks like he is either a rogue CIA agent or a covert Al-Qaeda operative trying to bring down the free world.
Yeah, it did not seem for a second it felt like someone not from Sony came out on the stage, was crashing the press conference. And it's the only key you had that was not the case was that then they brought in this really dramatic, green lighting. It looked like he was being illuminated from, a traffic light outside a window with the blinds closed. I have no idea why they had the presentation like that. It was super serious.
So he says all this stuff, and I was thinking, all right, is this the Watch Dogs presentation?
Yeah, because the Watch Dogs presentation at the last E3 had this very, the Watch Dogs is all about surveillance and stuff like that, and they had, this sort of, viral marketing sort of vibe to it there.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, so what is he talking about? And then he just makes this total 180, completely out of the blue, says, what if there were superheroes, basically?
Yeah. What if humans suddenly developed superpowers? What would that be like? What if humans were living weapons that you had no idea who they were, that they could just go to any airport just through any metal scanner and nobody would have any idea? And what would it be like then?
And he really never ties it back to the main...
No, not at all. Yeah. It's just, there's government surveillance. Also, hey, what if there were superheroes? Only just super serious the entire time, completely straight-faced.
And then they talk about Infamous Second Son. So... that was fucking weird.
That was really weird. That and the Drive Club thing, these two really over-the-top demos of games, but in completely different ways.
Yeah.
And so, before we started the podcast, I had to show you those two videos because they were just so extreme in how they presented their games.
Crazy.
But what they actually showed from Second Son, I don't even know if that was actually real-time footage or whatever. It did they did not take the pains to say and prove it was real-time footage. But again, if it's an Infamous game, if you like the Infamous games, I assume you're going to like this. But, the most interesting thing about that game was how they chose to present it. But so then after that, that guy goes off stage probably to go kill himself or something. I have no idea. But to go to bring down the government. I don't know what. I don't even know. I think they said his name, but it wasn't anyone I recognized. I've seen some stuff from Sucker Punch before.
Yeah.
That guy, it felt like they brought an actor on stage.
Right.
That dude should be in movies, because it was weird, but that dude fucking sold it. I was kind of terrified at a certain point. He was intense. So that dude goes off the stage, and then they have what I think is honestly the most interesting part of the whole conference was then they brought off a guy, dude, his name is Jonathan Blow, and he is, a couple of years ago, he created the game Braid, which is an indie platformer that sort of really... it was the indie platformer. It was what made everybody start using the term indie, start looking at indie games. It created the indie game scene, and it also was the beginning of everybody realizing, oh hey, Xbox Live Arcade is kind of a weirdly draconian system at a certain point. And that Jonathan Blow was extremely outspoken after he made the game Braid, hugely critically acclaimed. He was very outspoken about how Microsoft kind of fucked him over and made that process very difficult, and how he would never go to Microsoft. And he even said he would never develop games for consoles again because he had such a bad experience about it. They would just stay PC exclusive, and then after that he talked about he had a team making an indie puzzle game called The Witness, and that was kind of it. That was all you knew about. Kind of went away for a very long time. So now they bring Jonathan Blow out onto the stage and have him talk about how The Witness is going to come to the PS4. It's not going to be a PS4 exclusive. I'm damn sure it's not going to come to the next Xbox, but it's going to be on probably tablets and PCs also. But I think this was incredibly interesting, and this was sort of what is encouraging me to believe that they're going to make efforts to make indie developers bring indie developers onto their console because, Jonathan Blow does have a team. This team doesn't have a name. I thought that was really interesting because when I was bringing up our outline, I was like, I wanted to make sure I knew all the studio names for the various games. It was just by Jonathan Blow. That's all I could find anywhere.
So does he have, how Spike Lee has in front of his movies, he says a Spike Lee joint? So does Jonathan Blow have just a blow job in front of all his games?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I've been looking into the Jonathan Blow stuff for a while, so it's like all the blowjob jokes. I've gotten that out of my system with his name, but yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
But yeah, so
this podcast would be incomplete without one.
yeah, it's obligatory. You have to have a blowjob joke whenever Jonathan Blow comes up.
Yeah.
But personally, I thought I never finished Braid. I'm not a platformer dude, and I thought it was kind of interesting. But the thing that really turned me off about Braid was that people talking about it, and Jonathan Blow himself personally, I thought sounded incredibly pretentious and really turned me off from that. They sounded indie in the way that's like sort of hipster indie, like you think you're way smarter, doing way more than you really are doing with your game kind of thing, and that kind of turned me off. And it was like that with Jonathan Blow's presentation. I know a lot of people find his stuff very inspiring because he is, one of those few guys where he is an indie developer and he makes very interesting games and he makes very innovative games. Like, I totally recognize he's a very talented dude, but whenever he talks about games, he just sounds like a pretentious asshole to me, personally. So I felt that way about his presentation. The Witness looks kind of interesting, but it's also not a game that demos well at all. Like, they showed a trailer of it. I did not get any sense of what the puzzles were really like, but it seems like it's sort of this sort of open world puzzle game. Seemed kind of interesting where you're on this island and there are a bunch of different puzzles. And you have this whole thing where it's we take the epiphanous aha moment that you have in puzzles games. And it's we boil that down into its distilled form. And it's he kept on talking about how every single puzzle in our game has an idea at its heart. And I'm like, every puzzle that is what a puzzle is it has an idea at its heart, and you have to figure out what that idea is. That's a puzzle, asshole. But if you're into puzzle games, The Witness is probably going to be a very good game. I don't like Jonathan Blow's stuff personally, but it is at the very least an interesting move by Sony to bring him out on stage, and a blow to Microsoft. Not to use a pun, but
the game itself will probably not blow.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But I'm damn sure that he's not going to bring his game to the next Xbox console. He's been so outspoken about it, and just outspoken about not being on consoles in general. So it's very interesting that Sony was somehow able to bring Jonathan Blow out on stage and have him bring his game to their console, and so that's interesting. That's a very interesting development.
It's an opportunity they did not blow.
Okay, let's move off of the Jonathan Blow's talk. Let's move off of that. Let's go on to very famous, very accomplished developer and publisher Capcom came out.
Fewer friends I can make.
This is one of the things that I thought was really interesting about the whole conference was that there were not a lot of Japanese guys coming out on stage. Sony is a Japanese company. That's they're primarily Japanese, and I thought that was very interesting. That seemed like a lot of the design features about the console itself felt very Western. So it seems like they're taking a lot of lessons learned in the Western gaming market and really infusing it into the PlayStation 4. But finally we got a Capcom guy to come out. He had a translator, but he spoke very briefly English at the very beginning. And this is my favorite part about these conferences. Whenever they have Japanese people come out, this is obviously English is their second language. They don't use it that much, but they always try to tell a joke when they come out, and the joke never works. It will never work. That will just never happen because because one, they can't just present the joke properly because they don't speak English well enough to do it. But then also there's just this cultural divide where it's you're not going to get a lot of Japanese jokes if you're an American dude. And so and then when Square Enix came out, exactly same situation. And it's always my favorite part is to see just really awkward silence after the Japanese guy tries to make a joke that's it's not going to land. It's never going to land. If I tried to go to Japan, came on stage and tried to make a joke in Japanese, it would never work. Let's just let's as a human society figure out if we're moving to a different culture and with a language that we're not intimately familiar with, don't try to tell jokes.
Okay.
But yeah, Capcom came on stage. They talked a lot about how they're developing a Panta-Ray engine is what they're calling it, their new engine to move over from the MT framework engine that they use on the current consoles. And Capcom has always been very technically impressive with their engines that they bring onto new consoles. The MT framework, that was the engine that brought us, everything from Dead Rising, which again, that's the game that I thought showed off in terms of gameplay sense what the next generation could do with all the zombies rendered on screen at the same time. But then also Resident Evil 6, visually, on the same engine, is one of the most technically impressive games of this generation, whether you like the gameplay or not. So having Capcom come out there, that was cool. They showed off the working title of a game called Deep Down. Terrible fucking title. One of the most awful titles I've ever heard. But it seemed like it was some sort of fantasy type game, and I didn't get a good sense of whether it was running in real time or not.
Yeah.
Are you trying to think of like Jonathan Blow and Deep Down?
I'm
trying to think of how to combine those two.
Well, that would be the name of the Jonathan Blow game. It'd basically be the video game version of Deep Throat.
Yes, it's just Deep Down by Jonathan Blow. But yeah, they showed about like a minute long trailer, and it seemed really cool. But I had absolutely if that was real time footage, this was the most technically impressive thing. Like it looked fucking phenomenal. But there's one thing that really turned me off about it. It was that clearly nobody was playing the game. They didn't do like the Killzone thing where there was a guy up there with the fucking controller clearly playing an actual game. It was very clearly a trailer. I don't know if it was rendered in real time or not. But they bothered to put like a little tiny HUD thing down in the left-hand corner that had like a sword icon that was like sort of like glowing, and then it's like to the right there was like a shield icon, to the left there's like a potion icon. Just like that's not in-game footage, guys. There's no way you're like if this is in-game footage, you're playing fucking Dragon's Lair. It's a quick time event if anybody's controlling this game. Don't put the HUD there. Yeah. I know this is just there because you're trying to make it seem like, yeah, guys, this is a video game. There's a little tiny HUD thing. It's like, that was kind of dumb, but...
Yeah, it indicates at least that Capcom has some good ideas.
Yeah, and Capcom, Capcom came out there and is supporting the PlayStation 4. Not a big surprise, but, you have to bring some of those really well-known publishers and developers out there. And, Capcom makes a lot of really good games, so having their support out there is good. Then moving on, the next primary Japanese demo is Square Enix came out there. The big, Sony's big dog, even though they don't necessarily only make games for Sony consoles. Ever since Final Fantasy VII, that is one of their big developers for some of the games that sell Sony systems.
Well, even when Final Fantasy 13 wound up being a dual console title, came up for the 360, that wound up not being.
It's a multi-platform title in the loosest sense of the word, because it's like how Skyrim is a multi-platform title.
Right.
It's like, hey, you can get Skyrim on the PS3, or you could get Final Fantasy 13 on the 360, but you don't want to.
No, they basically had to strip it bare for the 360.
Yeah, that is definitely a title that showed off that the PS3 is much more technically impressive than the 360 if you know how to program for the cell processor.
Yeah.
But honestly, the Square Enix thing was pretty disappointing just because, well, I should say, they did not announce any new games at all. They did have, after they showed a cinematic demo, and they had another guy come on stage, and this is really awkward to get. This is because the guy, I forget what their names were, it's like Hashimoto, both of the guys had the name Hashimoto, and the second dude came on stage and made a joke about how the other Hashimoto guy is not his brother. Didn't land at all.
Yeah.
Terrible fucking joke. It was awful. But then after he said that, he basically said, we will be, look forward to the next E3, we will be talking about another Final Fantasy game. It's basically exactly what he said. So, the E3, that I thought it was interesting, they did not specifically say Final Fantasy 15. They said another Final Fantasy game, so...
Versus 13!
You don't know, maybe that 8-year development cycle, maybe they were really making it for the PS4 the entire time and nobody knew.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so they did say that, so if you're looking forward to Final Fantasy, whatever, next...
Who knows?
There.
Maybe at E3 they'll announce Final Fantasy Versus 13 2, and they'll get to work on that, and hope that by the time it comes out, 13.1 is out.
Yeah, there's maybe Square Enix will announce the last Guardian is Team Echo, but maybe there'll be Kingdom Hearts 3. Maybe that'll be it. It'll be Versus 13, and also that team has been developing Kingdom Hearts 3 at the same time. They'll both come out on the same day, motherfuckers. Maybe that's what Square Enix will do.
As far as I know, and I think they've actually confirmed this in conferences, development has not started in any way, shape, or form on Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah, I know, because the team that would make it is making Versus 13.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been making Versus 13 for a while now. But,
the entire lifespan of the PS3.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, so, maybe that will be like the last games that comes out on the PS3. Who knows? Who knows what will happen with that Final Fantasy game they'll talk about at E3. But they did show a real-time cinematic demo of something called Agni's Philosophy that they showed off, I want to say at GDC a year ago. I specifically saw this exact same video a year ago. That was part of what made it kind of disappointing is, I've seen this. And it was something that a year ago was this is something that they're making for next-generation consoles, obviously. It was something like the first things you saw that was clearly for next-generation consoles, but they couldn't say that it was going to be for next-generation consoles yet. But I should say, the Agni's Philosophy demo, fucking awesome. It is one of those trailer-type things that it's 3 minutes long, and it's just a fun trailer to watch. I was so happy to get to be reminded that it exists because it's really cool. It has a sort of it sort of like seems like it's mixing a lot of modern Final Fantasy design elements with a more realistic modern world where they're like dudes with like AK-47s, they're like downtrodden like Middle Eastern type city, but they're summoning dragons. They have like this cool scene where like the main character in the demo, the girl, like has this like glass bottle with water in it, and she uses like magic shit to like kind of like the water starts boiling, and she has to like pour it on herself, and like her wounds sort of like scab over and heal, but it looks really painful. Like their system of magic and like the style behind the demo was really awesome. So I'm really hoping that this is like they're saying it's just a real-time demo for like just a cinematic thing, and they're just saying it's not going to be a project, but I'm really hoping that this is the direction they go in with whatever the next Final Fantasy thing is, because it looked really cool. This, at least stylistically, I think is awesome. I totally recommend watching it because it looks fucking cool, and it's just really cool stylistically. It's
the trailer for Final Fantasy 13-4 Agnes Philosophy. It's the subtitle for...
Exactly, yeah. So, the little, like, pretty underwhelming showing, but I'm a big fan of the demo that they showed anyway, so I was kind of happy seeing that. But then, to me, the most exciting thing, the most interesting thing that got showed off, something, again, that we already knew about a year ago, but was Watch Dogs by Ubisoft. Ubisoft kind of finally came back out, finally was able to say, yes, motherfuckers, Watch Dogs is going to be a next-generation title. Obviously, the demo that we showed at E3 would not possibly run, just like based on the textures, would run on 360 or PS3 hardware.
Yeah.
So they were able to come out, had like a 4-minute-long demo, like real-time demo of Watch Dogs. So again, like actually running on, it was probably PC hardware using PS4 specs, because they didn't actually have a PS4 there. But that was really cool. It showed like Watch Dogs. It's a real-time, or it's a open world type game, and the first demo that they showed at E3 that I thought was phenomenal showed off a lot of like the story and writing stuff, but then also sort of the procedural shit you could do with the guy sort of has basically a smartphone that is able to manipulate the city infrastructure systems, so he's able to like fuck with traffic lights to cause cars to crash, or in this demo he brings up sort of I don't know what you call them, but like the big like stone pillars that you like can come up to like block cars from going down certain roads. He has this just like come up like right before cop car is going to cross an intersection, he just like slams into it, the car flips over. And so it just seems like a really exciting title, and this demo just showed off him walking around in the open world, finding like this one woman who has like a restraining order against another guy, realizing that it's like this, and seeing the other guy he has a restraining order against, and they're about to like cross, so he realizes, oh, like something is going to happen here. There's going to be an interaction. So he gets into place. The dude pulls a gun on the girl. Is like threatening her. So the main character walks out, like starts chasing the dude down, like tackles him to the ground, and then runs away from the cops. And it's like just this 4-minute long demo, but really impressive, really awesome looking. This is by far the game I am most excited for. It's exciting. It's a new IP. It's a little bit disappointing that there was, the next other games that we show are not going to be new IPs that Sony has. Like, they didn't show off anything brand new that looked really exciting, but Watch Dogs looks fucking awesome. So,
yeah, and it's definitely a next-gen game.
Yeah, I mean, there will be versions on the 360 and PS3 that they said that there's going to be that, but they're clearly going to be stripped-down versions, and you're going to want to get the next-generation version of this game.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking Watch Dogs. It looks amazing.
Oh,
I'm super excited about this game. And then I should have showed you this video, because this is like the other presentation where the dude who came out way too into it, like the speech he gave when he was presenting it was like a fucking movie villain, like a James Bond villain speech about how like technology is watching us, and like my like everything about me and my loved ones are on this phone kind of thing. Like he had this like Christian Slater voice. It was great.
No, PlayStation 4, I expect you to die.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So, that happened. Watch Dogs went off stage. Oh, I should say, I forgot, there were also 2 different performances, like, in this period that were, one was Quantic Dreams. They're the guys who made Heavy Rain, came out and gave a tech demo of, so I should bring up this picture so you can see it, of basically an old man face using rendered in PS4 technology that looked really impressive. It was one of my favorite parts, because here it is, like sort of what the technology can do in terms of like he would have like had a lot of focus on the emotion in the eyes, and I'm just showing you a still picture, but having it actually move in real time looked really impressive, and it's one of those things that I've been excited about. A lot of games that have come out in like late current gen, like Halo 4 and Far Cry 3, having much more impressive like performance capture technology and being able to expand that out in the next generation. That was really impressive with Quantic Dreams. And then also, Media Molecule, the guys who make Little Big Planet, had a really bizarre thing. I'm not even going to really try to describe it, but they had move they had like this like puppet performance, but they were all using Move controllers. I have no idea if it was. I have no idea how you'd be able to control that with Move. It was completely ridiculous. They didn't like make any effort to seem like it was something that anybody could feasibly do. But Media Molecule is a cool company. Like they do cool stuff. They're really creative people. But yeah, I've like it'll just be another video I'll have to show you after this podcast because it's just really, really bizarre. Yeah. Nothing really to say about it past that. But then after all that stuff, this is the biggest letdown. This was ridiculous. This part of the conference where I was watching it live and they brought Blizzard out onto the stage. And if anybody who knows anything about video games, Blizzard is one of the, is alongside with Valve, the big PC game developer. They made World of Warcraft. Before that, they have, all the Warcraft franchises, the StarCraft franchises. They are, for me, my, historically and nostalgically speaking, my favorite PC developer, because I played the Diablo, StarCraft, and Warcraft games all the time on PC when I was a kid. I absolutely loved those games. So I was really interested and excited to have Blizzard come out on stage because I remember back fucking 2003 or 4, Blizzard was saying they're going to make a console game for the Xbox and the PS2 called StarCraft Ghost, bringing the StarCraft universe and having a third-person action shooter game in the StarCraft universe. Looked fucking awesome. Never happened. God damn it. That's one of the most disappointing pieces of vaporware of all time. So I was like, yes, finally, fucking next-gen StarCraft Ghost on the PS4 or something. This is going to be awesome, a console title. And the Blizzard guy who came out there, he totally built it up like it was going to be the next Blizzard game that they're going to bring to the console platform. It is going to be amazing. He's so built it up like it's going to be. I was on the edge of my seat. Yes, what is it? What the fuck is it going to be? Diablo 3, the game that came out a year and a half ago on the PS3 or on the PC that a lot of people thought kind of was okay and was nowhere near as good as Diablo 2 was. Yay! And it's going to be on the PS4 and on the PS3 at some time in the future. So
that was a waste of time.
Yeah, that reveal was really disappointing. I mean, at least it totally makes sense from a business perspective because again, Blizzard, huge fucking developer. The Activision Blizzard partnership, fucking just buckets of money with World of Warcraft, and since they're traditionally a PC developer, it's a pretty big story to have Blizzard have a console game today. The last thing they did in consoles was they made a PS1 version of Diablo 1, but I don't even think Blizzard was even really involved in that. Yeah. It was there was an N64 version of StarCraft. It's a fucking piece of shit. I'm almost positive Blizzard had almost nothing to do with the actual port of that game. But, from a business perspective, it's interesting for projects potentially in the future. But I have no interest in playing Diablo 3 on a console. I don't think almost anybody has an interest in playing Diablo 3 on the console.
I guess best case scenario means there will be a decent game out there at launch.
Yeah, I mean, I never played Diablo 3 because a lot of the stuff about it that launched kind of really turned me off of that title. And Diablo is my least interested. I'm least interested in that franchise from Blizzard, anyways. But I might, if I can get it cheap at some point. I would probably play it on the PS4 instead of the PC. Just, I don't know. My PC is not that powerful, But
you mean your MacBook? You use it as a PC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'll have a better PC in the future soon, but there's something like that. But Diablo 3 will be out there. Blizzard. Hopefully, there will be something more interesting in a couple of years that Blizzard will bring to the console space for PS4. But then the last game that came out. This is something that I was kind of anticipating after they brought Activision on stage with Blizzard, but. A week ago, we talked about the reveal of Bungie's new game, Destiny. I say reveal. Yeah, they said it's called Destiny, and they kind of talked about it, and they showed some screenshots and a lot of concept art. So I was on our podcast, I said what would be really interesting would be if Bungie came out, and that would be a big blow to bring the Jonathan Blow shit back. A big blow to Microsoft to have fucking Bungie out on stage for the PS4 reveal, talking about Destiny coming to the PS4 because Bungie is the dudes who made Halo, and that is what made the Xbox. The Xbox would have sunk if it was not for Halo. And lo and behold, after Activision comes on stage with Blizzard, they bring out the Bungie guys and show off some more footage of Destiny. Not a lot of information was revealed. It was mostly, hey guys, we are bringing Destiny. It's going to be on the PS4 for sure. The most interesting news was there's going to be some form of exclusive content only on the PS4. We don't know enough about the game to even know what that content would be, but That's a very Microsoft kind of thing to do, is to have exclusive content. Like, that's always, Microsoft always has, like, fucking the map packs for Call of Duty come out earlier on the Xbox or something like that. So, It seems like Sony was playing a pretty shrewd game with Activision, I think, here, where it's like this was a very smart move to have Bungie come out there and, I wished we could have seen a bit more of Destiny on that stage, like a proper trailer. We saw some gameplay, like a dude shooting some guns, but, smart move by Sony, all the way. It's a very smart thing to do to bring Bungie out there. And Bungie, again, has left their like fucking game platform that they made originally with the Mac, moving on to the Xbox, now from the Xbox, and now they're like, they're going to be developing games for the PS4 and bring exclusive content.
Those turncoat motherfuckers.
Yep, there's like eventually they're going to jump from the PS4 onto whatever like Sony's next competition is or something, and
Wii U.
Yep, it's just going to be all the way down the line. Bungie just building people up and then knocking them the fuck down. But that was cool to see. That was the last game that brought up, and that was basically the end of the conference. They then came out to give some concluding statements about the PS4. It will come out holidays 2013. No talk about price or anything like that.
And most interestingly, we did not see the system itself.
They did not bring out the box. The word on the street is because they have not finalized the design.
Oh yeah, they actually confirmed this in an interview the next day. They said, we don't know what it. We're like we are working on it, but we are not ready to show it. And I understand that. It's fine.
Yeah. And that is by far the least important part. Like, I do not care particularly how much. Like, as long as it is a relatively small, as long as it's not a giant brick and it looks sleek, it says PlayStation 4 on it, and it's black. That is all I want it to look like, basically.
They should make it look just like the PS1. With the disc tray in the middle and the big power buttons.
Yeah.
And
that they should. That'd be crazy.
Have
literally just put the hardware in a PlayStation 1 shell and put it out there.
Replace the controller ports with USB ports.
Yeah. They should although, again, when I rewatched that really old the PS3 reveal conference, the design of the console was the same, but it was really funny when they were showing it off because they had 3 Ethernet ports and 2 HDMI ports on the back of that motherfucker. There were a lot of holes in the back of that original design for that console that they were then like, why do we have 3 Ethernet ports and 2 HDMI ports?
What the fuck would you need 2 HDMI ports?
Well, there was this whole thing. I completely forgot about this with the PS3. Where originally they were going to have multiple monitor support, where you would kick it. Then they were had this whole thing where they were going to you could play games on one screen and then have all this other technical information on some smaller monitor off to the side.
That's stupid. That's really stupid.
Yeah, and they realized, that's pretty fucking stupid. There also was another thing I forgot about, where they originally were going to have 7 PS3 controllers be able to hook up to the PS3.
I remember that now. Yeah.
Don't know what. I don't even know. Everyone clapped when they said that. Don't even know what you do that for. Yeah. What could you possibly have? It is rare enough to even use 4 controllers on a console at the same time nowadays. When did you ever use 7? But that's really getting away from the point. They have not show the console. I don't give it. A lot of people made a big stink about that. I don't give a shit. They obviously also want to save that. There's probably come E3, they're going to walk out on that stage, fucking pull a curtain off of a box and be like, "This is what the PS4 looks like, motherfuckers." Marvel in its beauty.
It costs X.
Yeah, hopefully around $400 to $500 is what I'm looking for the.
Well, do you want to talk about that? Because that's one of the unanswered questions. You have a whole list here?
I have a list of some of the questions that I had post the conference. Yeah, what is the price? That is the big. Obviously we're not going to find that out here, but that is the big thing hanging over this console. Particularly finding out the DDR5, 8 gigabytes of RAM. That is expensive fucking shit, and obviously Sony being a big hardware maker is going to get really good deals on that. Someone buying a 2 gigabytes of DDR5 on a fucking video card. That's $200+ for fucking just for the memory, not for the whole video card, and so. Sony's going to get a lot better deal on that memory than a consumer would, but it's still going to be really expensive.
Well, they're going to sell it at a loss. I mean, that's just how it works.
All consoles do that, but it'll be interesting to see how much of a loss. I think they would be making a huge mistake if they went anywhere over $500. Even $500 is pushing it.
I agree. I think there will be something under $400 as a unit, either $399 or $350.
Yeah.
If they could somehow get that sucker down to $350, they will sell like hotcakes.
Yeah, that would be the dream price point. I don't think it's ever going to sink to $350. I'm guessing $400. Maybe I think the smartest move to do would be have $400 for the standard SKU, and then if they're splitting SKUs like everyone has been, $450 for the premium.
Yeah, and I think those would be actually fair price points.
Yeah,
for what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, I would definitely buy a PS4 for $400 or $450.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
But I don't think they're going to go over $500 because, again, this whole press conference showed that they are cognizant of the mistakes they made 7 years ago.
Yeah, and one of the biggest ones was the price of the original PlayStation 3, that nobody had enough money to buy it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, again, we don't have any idea of the price. They didn't hint at anything. They didn't talk about it at all. So that'll be one of the most interesting things to say. There's, again, we don't know what the console looks like. I thought one of the very interesting things is there were two huge first-party Sony developers that did not come out on that stage. And they are Naughty Dog, who made, the Jak and Daxter franchise and then moved on to making the Uncharted series, which is, the big PlayStation 3 franchise. Uncharted, the biggest critical darling, I think, on the PlayStation 3 as far as exclusives go. Then also Insomniac Games, who made Ratchet & Clank in the PS2 era, and then made the Resistance franchise in this era. And so they did not come out on that stage, so I'm curious to know, because even... You would kind of expect that they would at least have been there to talk, show a tech demo or something, tease something, because they're damn sure going to make a game. Naughty Dog is owned by Sony. Insomniac, I believe, is actually independent, but they've only ever made games for Sony consoles. So damn sure they're going to make something for the PS4. Very interested to see what that's going to be. If they're going to do something similar with the Killzone and Infamous franchises and trying to make make another Uncharted franchise, but have it be Uncharted in terms of gameplay, but new story stuff. Historically, Naughty Dog, every single console they have, they went from fucking Crash Bandicoot on PS1, then to Jak and Daxter on PS2. As soon as the PS3 came out, they made Uncharted. Historically, that developer has made new IPs for every single console. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. That's one I'm most curious about because for every single Sony console, my favorite games on those consoles have been the Naughty Dog games. On PS1, my most fond memories of playing PS1 games are Crash Bandicoot. 2, Jak and Daxter. I fucking love Jak and Daxter and Jak 2. Awesome games. And then I haven't played Uncharted yet, but by all accounts, those are the best exclusives for the PS3. So excited to see what Naughty Dog does, and curious to see what Insomniac does when they come out of the woodwork. Because they're definitely... I'm expecting that those... that's another thing we should mention is that none of the games they talked about were confirmed to be launch titles. I think for sure Killzone will be. Don't know about Infamous. I would suspect Drive Club would be. Probably Watch Dogs will be as well. Destiny will not. But again, I would expect Naughty Dog and Insomniac, they are probably going to stagger those releases a bit and not, they're not going to want to have all the first party developers bring games out fucking 2013. They're going to want to spread that out. I'm guessing Infamous will probably be 2014 or something like that. But
yeah.
That was one of the biggest questions I had coming out of that. Let's see, a lot of these we already talked about. I think the most interesting one in terms of online functionality is, again, what will that be free? How will PS Plus change? Those kinds of questions. That's what I'm most interested to know about in terms of system level stuff at the come E3. Then what size is the hard drive going to be? That's key. Particularly having that rendering video stuff. If there are people going to be rendering a lot of videos onto their hard drives with the PS3 or with the PS4, at a certain point, with that being 1080p video, that's going to take up a lot of space. So interesting to see how much that hard drive is going to bring out. Then also missing from the conference, I thought this was really interesting. EA never came out, and EA, that's EA and Activision are the two major publishers, and EA was nowhere to be seen. And EA, come back in 2005, they were all over that press conference, so I found interesting, and Activision was nowhere to be found. So, kind of flip positions there. I'm sure EA will make PlayStation 4 games, but they were not on the stage talking about, whatever Madden or something is going to look like on the PS4.
Is it possible Microsoft has locked them down for their own conference?
That is possible. They might be splitting that way, because it seems like, Activision is definitely putting its foot more on the PlayStation side with having Destiny come out there. That decision is an Activision decision, not a Bungie decision to come out on the Sony stage. So I think it does seem like that may be how that division is going down. And if that's the case, Sony's winning. Electronic Arts, that company is losing favor so fast. After the Mass Effect 3 debacle, every decision they make, everybody is all over EA, and it's sort of good for Activision because before it was about how Activision killed Guitar Hero and everyone felt like they were killing Call of Duty, like putting those games out too much. Then EA started doing stupid shit with like Day 1 DLC, microtransaction type stuff in Dead Space 3. Everybody hates that shit. Everybody hates that shit. They, by all accounts, fucking EA killed Dragon Age 2 from BioWare and forced that game to come out way too early. So if that's how that division's coming down, Sony is winning that game.
Yeah.
That's going to win that game pretty hard.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
And I guess, to wrap up this whole discussion of the PS4, I think it just comes down to, would you, from this conference, be interested in buying a PS4 as your next game system?
It is what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
Out of all the options I've been presented so far, with building a new PC myself, potentially getting a Steam box when that stuff starts coming out, with all those hardware manufacturers making various small form factor PCs that you can hook up to a TV, and then my expectation is, I'm guessing the Microsoft announcement is going to be a disappointment after how good this Sony press conference was and how well it continued their momentum and their trajectory from where they were for the last 2 years, and that upward trajectory has been immense. And Microsoft has not had that ever since the Kinect and their rebranding and extreme focus on the multimedia side of the Xbox 360.
They've basically abandoned gaming.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of hope that they're going to refocus onto just the core gaming audience like Sony did here. So,
yeah, I definitely have to. I want to talk about this because I am just so impressed by what Sony has done here.
Yeah,
and I am so looking forward to this. I am sure that the next Xbox will be very powerful. I'm sure it will be comparable in many ways to this, but I don't think it'll have a lot of the other cool little things they're doing here. It doesn't have anything like the Vita that integrates.
Yeah.
And I do think I agree with what we said earlier. 50% of that conference will be Kinect 2.
Yeah, and definitely.
They've just chosen a different path, and I think we opened this podcast by talking about that Sony exited the PS2 era with this massive amount of hubris, and it brought them the fuck down.
And Microsoft is in the exact same position because they gained just a staggering amount of market share. Sony owned that market coming into this generation, and now Xbox 360, at least in America, is basically on top. PS3 has more sales worldwide, but as far as America goes, Microsoft is where it's at. The Xbox 360 insanely is successful. They take so much market share from Sony, and Microsoft is just in that exact position. They think the Kinect thing is going to be huge because the Kinect sold pretty well for what it is, and they're going to keep on doing that. And they're in the exact position Sony was in, and I think they're going to have the exact same mistakes.
Yeah, and I think just the main thing for me is this PS4 announcement, while it's really cool and there were a lot of surprises, it is, to me, a natural extension of what Sony's been doing 2-3 years now. Microsoft, they've shown no indication that they're even interested in fostering interesting games.
Yeah.
They want to tout the Xbox as something different, and if people want to put good games out for it, fine.
Yeah.
They're interested in giving 343 just insane amounts of money to make Halo, but they're mostly leaving them on their own to do that.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. They are not fostering exclusives in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, the only thing I was racking my brain for what developers are exclusive to Microsoft, and after Bungie left, they made 343 Industries, and so Halo games are still going to come to Xbox consoles. The only other ones I can think of are Rare, which they bought, early on in the Xbox 360 era. Rare does not really make games for Microsoft consoles, though. They were responsible for a lot of the Avatars type stuff, and they a lot of system level stuff. And I'm not that interested in most Rare games, anyways. The only other studio they have is Lionhead Studios, who made the Fable franchise. But Peter Molyneux left that company to go do his weird iPhone Curiosity thing, and Fable 3 was a massive disappointment. So as far as exclusives go, Microsoft's got almost nothing. They are still clinging on to Halo, and at some point I will play Halo 5. But when those consoles launch, it's not going to launch with Halo 5 because Halo 4 came out 3 months ago.
Yeah.
The next, I'm looking for PS4 right now. It is definitely so impressive to me personally. Just every step of the way.
Yeah.
This was exactly my dream conference. It's in my wildest dreams. This is what Sony would come out. This is what they would do. This is what their attitude would be. This is the type of games and how much they would show of these games. The only thing I would like to see some new IPs, but I'm
coming.
Yeah, I'm coming. this is just a preliminary announcement. I'm expecting there will be a lot more game stuff coming E3.
I mean, literally, Sean is telling the absolute truth. If you go back and listen to our last podcast, I asked you point blank, what do you want out of a next generation console? And you just said, I want something that is comparable in power to a PC. I don't think it's going to happen. You said, I think they're going to... And you weren't even angry about this. You were just saying, I don't see how they're going to be able to build something that's comparable to current gaming PCs. Well, Sony made something that is not just comparable to current gaming PCs. It far surpasses what most gamers would have.
Yeah. This is, from everything that we've seen with the specs, this is a top-of-the-line gaming PC in terms of architecture. Obviously, it's a console, has the console OS, but in terms of what it physically can do, it is just as powerful as the most powerful gaming PCs you can really get on the market right now. And and the good thing about consoles is that you can squeeze so much more out of them than you can with PC hardware, because with PC hardware, it's modular. You just keep on upgrading it. So people designing games for PC games, or for PC hardware, don't squeeze, every last inch out of that hardware the way you do with a console. And I think, a lot of people look at the gaming market and see consoles holding PC games back, but I think realistically, consoles putting a pause on the technological development is actually really important, because what it does is allows game developers to get a lot more creative with what they do with their games, to not have to focus on constantly pushing the technological bar, squeezing what they can out of the existing technology, perfecting how they can do that and making that as easy as possible, and then focusing on the gameplay side. And I think the console market is extremely important to how video games are made. It's not just this whole, the PC gaming master race, everything on PC is always better. If consoles didn't exist, video games would be perfect. It's complete bullshit. If fucking consoles did not exist, the gaming market would be a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And so having that technological envelope being pushed now when it really needs to, when everything else has gotten stale, it's the right time to do this. I think this looks like an extremely impressive piece of hardware. I'm really, really interested to see how games are going to, like I said, looking at that 2005 E3 press conference with the PS3, those games barely looked like they were high definition when they showed those demos at that conference, when that technology was brand new. And 2 years later, when actual games are coming out of the PS3, looked so much better than that. So even though the stuff they showed at this conference looked basically comparable to stuff like Crysis 3 just came out on the PC on the top end, super running everything you possibly can on Crysis 3. That's basically what Killzone looked like. And that, again, that is just a real-time gameplay demo for the technology right now, not when it's been, coming out, not when we've been developing for that hardware for years. So,
And I pretty much agree with all that. I don't know a lot about the technology of all these things, so when I asked that question to myself last week, what do you want out of the next generation console? I think I was more focusing on sort of the sort of infrastructure side of it, and just saying a lot of what they showed here, that's kind of what I wanted. These cool, new ways of downloading, new internet features, new just ways to interact with gaming in ways you would not expect. That's kind of what I wanted out of it, and we're really getting that. Yeah. And I just feel like there's a lot of cool stuff on the PS4, and it's a lot of stuff that I didn't even know I wanted.
Yeah.
But I see it, and again, the only thing is that I think you and I were both adamant last week we would really love to see backwards compatibility, but that was before we knew how far they were going with this.
And at the very least, we still got a PS3. We've got our PS Vitas, the PS Vita can play PS1 games. Hopefully, PS2 classic sort of functionality will come to that as well. So, it's not like we're not going to be able to play those games ever again.
Right. So it's fine. And honestly, and this is another big deal for me, just in my life circumstance, is that if Xbox 720 comes out, has no backwards compatibility, there's no way I'm buying that day one. I just can't. I can't justify that because I have this massive Xbox 360 library. I would have to keep my 360 around. Mm-hmm. But with the PS4, I don't have a lot of PS3 stuff. Yeah. I could swap it out and be happy. Once in a while, I'd want to slot my PS3 back in there, and I could because it's easy to hook up. Yeah. But I could move on to that really easily, and I think this would be the right time to kind of jump ship and try something new.
Yeah, I think definitely if you're someone who has been sort of is really on the fence about what console you want to buy, I think you really have to be looking at Sony right now. It's such an impressive showing.
And we're
so fucking excited for E3 and to see, because now what this press conference got out of the way is they just they got all the basic stuff out of the way. It's the basic specs of the system, their vision for what they're trying to do with it, the basics of how sort of the streaming stuff will work, and you got a good taste of a lot of the games. It's And that's perfect. They did everything they needed to do with this press conference. So come E3, they have all that groundwork done before the E3 comes for when the console launches, so that when the E3's there, you get all the really interesting stuff. You get the real in-depth gameplay demos. You get all the announcements for the new IPs and new games that'll be coming to the system. You get the intricate specifics of like the price and what the console looks like. You get all that at E3 now, and then after that, like 5 months after E3, the console's probably going to come out in October or November. So yeah. I think
it's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah, Sony is just making so many smart moves with holding this conference now, doing what they did at this conference. They're doing everything fucking perfect. And I did not expect that.
No, neither of us did. You can listen to us. We thought, again, this was not supposed to be this episode of the podcast. We were going to run over their announcements for maybe half an hour, and then go on to another topic because we thought we
thought we had covered most of like our speculation stuff. Probably covered most of like basically what they were going to say. We thought,
and they really came swinging out of the gate. It will be fascinating to see what Microsoft does.
Yeah, that's because this is something we didn't talk about. I think one of the most interesting things, particularly about this era, is that the features, because when the Xbox 360 and the PS3 both came out, the big reason for those consoles to exist was because of high definition. Because that's really where like consoles needed to go. That's where gaming needed to go, because high definition TVs were becoming a thing, high definition movies were becoming a thing, Blu-ray and HD DVD. That's what we needed to do when those consoles came out. And so everybody knew that's what the PS3 and the 360 are basically going to be, are high-definition versions of their counterparts with some extra online functionality. But now there's no like sort of external reason really we need new consoles other than our technology keeps on increasing. There's no like, we don't need to make new consoles to fit our like new TVs. It's like some of that online functionality stuff. That's kind of what necessitates it, but there's so many different approaches you can take to integrate that. So you don't necessarily expect a parity of features for the next Xbox and the PS4. Like, I do not necessarily expect that the next Xbox is going to have video rendering and that share button, and is not going to have this, like, built-in social network. That's not necessarily automatically expected. The next Xbox controller is not automatically going to have a touchscreen on it for, user interface stuff. You don't necessarily automatically expect that. So, the next Xbox could be wildly different from what the PS4 is offering, and that's going to be really interesting to see, because if that is the case, either Microsoft or Sony are going to die this generation. Like, if they are not offering parity on consoles, one console is going to destroy the other one.
Yeah, this is going to be all-out war.
Yeah, like this might be the last big console war. Really, I think past this point, I don't necessarily see both of these companies coming out of here unscathed and like being able to make another console. So it's going to be so fascinating to see what Microsoft does in response to what Sony has done. See what the next Xbox is like, and this is like the fucking Battle of Minas Tirith.
Yeah.
This is where it all comes to a head.
Well, and one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of what we were talking about last week is one of the things I said is that I've been enjoying my sort of PlayStation experience more lately than I've been enjoying Xbox the last couple of years, because Xbox started out, it's Microsoft, you associate Microsoft with PC and sort of user freedom, and Xbox has become the antithesis of that at this point. It's not a system about user freedom at all, while the PS3 has held on to a lot of that. And the PS4 is kind of pushing that even further.
Yeah, definitely.
It really is like you're buying a computer.
One of the key tenets that they brought out for the very business conferencey type of they had 5 phrases. It's like, this is what defines our vision for the PS4. The last one was customizability and personalization. Yeah. So
I love that. I think that was my number one thing I said, is because I'm so sick of using the Xbox where that is gone.
Yeah, there is no personalization for the Xbox almost whatsoever.
It's all ads. It's all dominated by them, and I'm sick of that. And Sony is railing against that. They're saying, we know people like this about the PS3, so why not make it kind of central to what we do? I mean, the share button, that's totally a PC kind of thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. But this is where I really like consoles. This is like, you can do what you can do on PCs, but without all the fucking hassle that PC gaming provides you.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to actually probably get into PC gaming, like I kind of have been, you be in for a lot of browsing the internet trying to figure out how to get games to fucking work, because that is the PC experience. It is not user friendly in the slightest, and some of it is kind of rewarding when you do solve some of those problems. But on consoles, those problems simply do not exist.
Right,
and the consoles have the opportunity to be very user friendly, very simple, easy purchases to make. So.
Yep. So I think that's where we're going to wrap our discussion up, because my laptop battery is about to die.
So is mine.
So one last thing I want to say about sort of the podcast is, next week we will be doing our big Persona 4 review and discussion. Yes. And if you don't know what Persona 4 is, it's a JRPG, came out in 2008, was re-released on the PS Vita last year as Persona 4 The Golden. It's a nice HD remake with a lot of new stuff. It's one of our favorite games of all time. I just played it for the first time. Sean just replayed it as the Golden version. We've always wanted to do an episode on this. We don't usually do episodes on, like, one piece of media. It's pretty rare. But, like, we did one on, like, Dark Knight Rises, Amazing Spider-Man.
When, like, big stuff comes out that we're both really interested in. That tends to be our, like, big, this is this game or this movie episode.
Yeah. And this is much more niche. So if you don't know anything about Persona 4, don't want to listen to it, that's fine. We'll hit you back next week. But that's what we're going to be doing next week.
Yeah, I mean, this is just something that we have to do.
Yeah, it's for fun.
I think if you listen to when we make the podcast, I think you will understand why this game is just a game where you play it, it's like you have to talk about it, and we have this, we have this audience, we have this channel with which to announce it to the world. We fucking love Persona 4.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that next week. The week after that, I think, is when I will be making a fairly significant announcement on this podcast. I will be using it as a sort of marketing platform for something. That will be part of the next episode after the Persona 4 podcast. I have a really, really cool project that should be of interest to our listeners. I am really excited to tell you guys about. I have been sitting on it since last summer, and I am so excited to finally talk about it with you guys.
But it's the PlayStation 4.
Yes. No. But anyway, we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks, Persona 4 next week, and you just got an almost 3-hour episode about the PlayStation 4 because that's how much Sony brought it.
Yeah, seriously.
Talk about image rehabilitation. They should coach Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, I mean, God, dude, if you told me, like, 5 years ago, like 2 years into this console cycle, that when the PS4 is going to be announced, that I would be most likely jumping ship from the Xbox camp and going into Sony, I would have called you fucking crazy. Like, where the PS3 was at there, I would have thought you were fucking insane. I thought Sony was dead in the water. They had made so many mistakes. I have no idea how they turned it around like this. It is fucking incredible to me.
Yep. All right, so we will see you next week.
Yes.